Within a world of intricate design, a man reflects on the woman before him, Alexandra of Chevalier. He considers that, even including his real life, she is the heroine he loves the most. As this thought crosses his mind, she stands before him, a soft, knowing smile on her face. This world is the setting of a mobile game called Engage Hazard, or Inhaza for short. It is a chat-based romance RPG, filled with adventure, comedy, and numerous unique heroines to encounter. Within the game, there is a single, paramount condition for the protagonist to ascend the throne and become the next king. He must have the best fiancée in the world. The man for before is Harold Welly de Hovels, third prince of the de Hovels kingdom, one of the greatest powers among the Western kingdoms. But the story is not his. A different young man, clad in simple pajamas, covers his face in despair. He has just realized this morning that he has become that very same Prince Harold, a character known for being underhanded, despicable, and an incompetent villain. That person is now him. He sits bolt upright in bed, startled by the revelation. When he had opened his eyes, memories of a previous life flooded his mind, just like in the stories he used to read about reincarnation. He recalls his former life, where his name was Tachibana Haru. He had gone to college, but was poor at socializing, never quite managing to blend in with his peers. Because of this isolation, he sought solace in the 2D world of games. It was during this time that he first encountered Inhaza. Lying back in bed, he wrestles with his new reality. He admits to himself that he was addicted to the game and spent a great deal of money on it, but that isn't the issue. The true problem is having been reborn as Harold, of all characters. He remembers Harold's fate clearly. Driven by jealousy of the game's original protagonist, he plotted a rebellion, failed, and was executed. A grim realization dawns on him. There are only about 3 years until the main story begins. But as his eyes narrow with resolve, he makes a vow. He will not let that happen. He reasoned that since he knew everything there was to know about the world of Inhaza, this knowledge gave him an edge. With it, he should be able to do something to change his fate. His expression hardened with resolve. He would not let himself die like this. He would survive no matter what, and his determination extended beyond his own survival. A vision of Alexandra of Chevalier, shackled and facing a guillotine, flashed through his mind. He vowed to save her, too. Sometime later, dressed in the formal attire of a prince, he stared at his reflection with unease, wondering if this was truly the best path. From nearby, a voice called out to him. The call came from 2 maids, who clapped their hands in delight. They gushed that the outfit suited him perfectly and that his highness looked more wonderful than ever. He, however, was thoroughly displeased. He thought he looked ridiculously lame and felt uncomfortable, having exclusively worn black in his previous life. He sharply ordered them to bring him something black that fit better, declaring the current clothes unacceptable. After changing into a black uniform more to his liking, he admired his reflection, thinking it looked quite good. His satisfaction was cut short when he noticed the time on a nearby clock. As he reacted in alarm, an attendant rushed forward to hand him something. The item was a finely patterned handkerchief, held out for him to take. He soon found a use for it. Spotting a young girl crying nearby, he approached her and offered the handkerchief, asking if she was all right and telling her not to cry anymore. The girl's tears stopped, and she looked up at him with a gentle smile, clutching the handkerchief. As he walked away, he regretted not asking for her name. Just then, a voice called out for Prince Harold, and he cursed under his breath, telling them to go on as he hurried to catch up. He arrives before his father, the king, apologizing for his tardiness. His attention is then drawn to the young woman standing before him. It is Princess Alexandra. He introduces himself formally, expressing his honor at the meeting. His mind races with information from his past life. He recognizes her immediately. Alexandra of Chevalier, daughter of the Duke and a member of the most powerful noble family in the de Hovels kingdom. She was one of the heroines in the game, Engage Hazard. He recalls her reputation within the game's story. She was called the frozen villainess for her harsh attitude towards the other heroines. Despite being one of the first heroines introduced, her ability scores were considered the worst. This unpopularity had dire consequences. He remembers her tragic fate. If the player did not choose Alexandra's romance route, she and her father would be executed for plotting a rebellion. A character popularity poll from his old world confirmed she was ranked last among users. But even with all that, he remembers with certainty that she was still his favorite. There was a specific path in the game where one could see her true thoughts about the protagonist, and he wonders if she will be the one to finally look his way now. He recalls the exact moment she won him over. It was just a single line of dialogue, delivered with a sincere, heartfelt expression. That alone was all it took to steal his heart. This memory fuels his determination. He clenches his fist, resolving to stop being the incompetent villainous prince. He will survive in this world, for his own sake, and for hers. His prolonged silence breaks the courtly atmosphere. The king jests that Harold must be taken aback by Alexandra's beauty. Snapped back to reality, Harold stammers an apology, leaving Alexandra to look on with a puzzled expression. Seeing an opportunity, the king suggests that the two of them have some tea together in the courtyard. Now seated across from her, Harold feels the weight of his task. He knows he must build a relationship with her now, or else the worst possible future will come to pass. Yet, an awkward silence hangs between them. They aren't talking at all. He clenched his fist, a tremor running through his hand. This was the very situation he had hoped to avoid. Noticing his distress, Alexandra broke the silence, asking what was the matter. Gathering his thoughts, He began to speak, his gaze lowered. He admitted that he was surely aware of her low opinion of him, acknowledging that he had not been a very good prince up until now. Because of this, he explained, she still had the option to refuse their engagement. Her expression sharpened as she demanded to know what exactly he was trying to say. His gaze met hers, his own resolve solidifying as he gave his answer. 3 years. She was taken aback by his declaration. He leaned forward, his voice ringing with conviction, pleading for her to give him just 3 years. He vowed that in that time, he would prove himself and become a man worthy of her. He then prostrated himself before her, promising that if he was still a disappointment after those 3 years, he would personally go to his majesty and request that their engagement be broken. His voice was strained as he repeated his plea from the floor, begging her to please grant him 3 years. From her seat, Alexandra looked down at his bowed form, her thoughts hidden behind a neutral expression. He looked up, his expression tense. After a moment, she replied that she understood. She then declared that she would be the one to judge whether his feelings were genuine. Her decision made, she gave a silent signal. A maid named Monica appeared, acknowledging an order. Alexandra then turned back to Harold, outlining the terms of her test. She would strike him with all her might, and his task was simply to block it. The sudden proposal left him utterly bewildered. His mind raced, finding the proposition completely absurd. But her gaze was unwavering, and she challenged him directly, asking if his hesitation meant he was willing to have his earlier resolve dismissed as nothing but a farce. Her words found their mark. A short time later, he stood equipped with a sword and shield, his face set with grim determination. Across from him, Alexandra's stern demeanor softened into a gentle smile as she thanked him for accepting. He steadied his shield, his mind racing. It would be all right. She had told him to block it. He knew he might not be able to strike, but he was certain he could block a single hit. With renewed determination, he affirmed his resolve. Across from him, Alexandra raised her blade, her expression grim as she prepared to begin the test. The attack came in a blur of motion, far faster than he could have anticipated. His shield splintered into pieces under the overwhelming force, and the impact sent him staggering back on his knees, his own sword clattering to the ground. Before he could recover, Alexandra stood over him, her foot pressing down on his shoulder. He looked up in a daze, his eyes widening as he noticed something new. Her eyes were glowing red. He couldn't recall seeing anything like that happen before. Despite his confusion, he conceded the outcome, acknowledging that he had definitely witnessed Her Highness's resolve. A faint blush appeared on her cheeks as she smiled. She formally introduced herself as Alexandra of Chevalier and declared that she looked forward to seeing what Prince Harold would achieve in the next 3 years. Stunned and flustered, he could only manage a stammered thank you. With the test concluded and their agreement sealed, Harold waved goodbye as Alexandra's carriage departed. She watched him from the window, a gentle smile on her face. He watched the carriage disappear, a confident smile spreading across his face. This was the first step. He vowed to himself that in 3 years, he would definitely succeed. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Alexandra could barely contain her glee. She had done it. Finally, she celebrated inwardly, thinking of how she had harbored feelings for the prince ever since that fateful day, and now, she was actually engaged in. Her maid, Monica, gently interrupted her celebration. Addressing her as Odusoma, she advised Alexandra to remember to act prudently, even though she understood her happiness now that the engagement with Prince Harold had gone smoothly. Alexandra's giddy expression suggested that secretly asking for the engagement had been well worth the effort. Alexandra pouted, asking if she couldn't get a little leeway. Monica's expression remained firm as she acknowledged the truth in her mistress's feelings, but insisted that Alexandra understood her point. The maid then pointed out a simple, undeniable fact. Alexandra's face was incredibly flushed. The observation caught the princess completely off guard. She is startled when Monica points out that her eyes turned red, even if just for a moment, during the earlier match. Her maid presses the issue, warning that if Prince Harold were to discover the truth behind her eyes, the engagement she worked so hard for might be called off. Monica then advises her to be more cautious and questions why she couldn't be friendlier to the prince, at least offering a smile. Flustered, Alexandra shouts back that it's simply not possible for her. The blunt assessment continues as Monica points out that Alexandra often avoids socializing, concluding that her social skills are firmly below average for a young lady. The words strike Alexandra with the force of a physical blow. She quietly concedes the point, acknowledging that she is aware of her unfriendly demeanor. She knows people whisper behind her back, calling her cold as ice, or likening her to a villain from a storybook. Changing the subject, Monica admits she never imagined Prince Harold could block one of her attacks. Alexandra agrees, confirming that the strike was even empowered by her dragon's favor. She recalls the moment vividly, explaining that he didn't simply overpower it. Instead, at the point of impact, he subtly adjusted his blade to match the movement of her own, successfully dispersing the force. She suspects he doesn't even realize what he did. Her thoughts drift to a deeper memory. Clutching a card to her chest, she affirms that no other man is more fitting to be her partner. A past event surfaces in her mind, a day when he saved her from that place. For her, it can only be Prince Harold. Meanwhile, in his own chambers, Prince Harold sits and ponders his future. He knows that this world, in Haza, has a battle game mode, but he is acutely aware that if he were to fight now, he would surely die. He grimaces, thinking back to his demand for a 3-year engagement with Alexandra. He admits to himself it was just an attempt to look cool. The reality is that his ability scores are completely unbalanced. While his magic attack and defense are quite high, there's a significant flaw. To begin with, all of Harold's skills are light attribute, yet he himself possesses a dark attribute. Compounding this mismatch, his physical abilities are abysmal. His only advantage is an immense pool of 999 skill points, which are required to activate any of his abilities. He considered his predicament. While his princely form, Harold, had plenty of potential, the real question was how his other self, Tachibana Haru, would train his body. Haru, meanwhile, had a more immediate thought. He needed to find a weapon. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. A maid with a severe expression entered, announcing that she would be in charge of looking after him from this point forward. She introduced herself as Marion Seiler. A young woman in a maid's uniform formally introduces herself. She is Marion Seiler, and from this day forward, she will be in charge of looking after Prince Harold. The prince's eyes widen in shock. He recognizes the name instantly, his mind reeling with the question of why a heroine's here when she is supposed to be Wilfred's maid. She continues, telling him to feel free to entrust her with anything he needs. Harold, still processing this unexpected development, can only manage a quiet, hesitant acknowledgement. As she turns and walks away, Marion whispers under her breath, a single thought betraying her professional demeanor. How unlucky. The door clicks shut, leaving Harold's silhouette alone in the room. Alone, a wry smile forms on his face. He reflects on his own nature, an arrogant man who bows to the strong, an incompetent villainous prince. For someone like him, he muses, being treated with such disdain is actually more convenient. His thoughts drift to his true objective, to avoid the attention of the other heroines and live a quiet, peaceful life with his fiancée, Alexandra. This goal, however, is threatened by the current reality. According to the original course of events, Marion was not supposed to become Wilfred's maid for another 3 years. The deviation from the known path sends a jolt of pain through Harold. He clutches his chest, his face contorted in agony as he pleads for his suffering not to be too great. This is a glimpse into his past, a history not depicted in the story he knows as Inhaza. The source of his anguish is rooted deep in his childhood. Labeled incompetent from an early age and constantly compared to his exemplary brothers, he was unable to use the crest of de Hovels, the symbol of the royal family, or any other skills. Despite this, he strove to win his parents' approval, training and studying relentlessly, only to be met with indifference. One memory, however, is sharper and more painful than the rest. The words of his own mother echo through his mind. She told him that if he couldn't even act as a substitute for the first prince, Erdes, then he should at least try not to hold him back. Even now, the recollection feels like it is tearing his heart apart. He sits up in bed, the weight of his mother's words still heavy on him, and tentatively asks Marion for a wash basin. She remains perfectly still and silent, offering no response. A week passes. He reflects on how Marion has completely neglected her duties in that time. Even for the so-called incompetent villainous prince, he considers her behavior excessively disrespectful. To pursue his goals, he makes his way to the castle's training grounds, an empty hall lined with practice dummies and racks of swords. He trains relentlessly, swinging his sword day after day since his memories returned. Yet, he questions if this physical exertion alone can truly make him stronger, especially in a world that, unlike the one in Inhaza, has no system of levels to quantify progress. The path to improving his physical abilities is clear, simple, repetitive training. But a far greater puzzle confronts him. How can he possibly increase his magic power when he is incapable of using any magical skills? A memory from Inhaza surfaces. Weapons of certain rarity possess their own unique skills. The realization dawns on him. The only way forward is to train with a weapon that already has a magical skill embedded within it. He scans the armory, convinced there must be a weapon with a magic skill among them. If he can find one, he might finally be able to train his latent magical abilities. However, another thought gives him pause. His shoulders slump as he faces a harsh reality. Before chasing magical power, he must first focus on maximizing his meager physical abilities. He reasons that perhaps things will improve then, and, at the very least, it could be useful in an emergency. With renewed, if reluctant, purpose, he begins his physical training once more, swinging his sword with all his might. From behind him, Marion watches with a dismissive sound, unimpressed. Suddenly, a bucket clatters down onto his head, interrupting his swing. He looks up in shock as Marion smirks, remarking coolly that he doesn't seem surprised at all. He laughed it off, claiming he was merely imitating someone without talent. Marion's expression remained cold as she questioned his statement, offering to assist his training if he truly possessed talent. Her offer left him speechless. His mind raced, recalling details from the world he once knew as a game. Marion hailed from a family of knights, possessing exceptional physical prowess. Even Alexandra, considered the weakest heroine, wielded immense power. A realization struck him. Training with one of them could be the key to his own strength. He hesitantly asked if she would truly be all right with it. With a confident smile, Marion confirmed that she didn't mind at all. As their blades met, he immediately felt the immense pressure of her strength. He knew he had to overcome this level of power if he hoped to survive. Marion, however, was unimpressed, coldly pointing out that his guard was weak. With a single, powerful motion, she sent him reeling backward, his sword knocked from his grasp. She leveled her blade at him, declaring him an incompetent and useless prince. It was only natural, she added, that everyone had given up on him. He sat defeated against the wall, the sting of her words sharp. Marion loomed over him, her voice dripping with scorn as she asked if it was frustrating to be so thoroughly belittled by a mere maid. He acknowledged the truth internally. The Prince Herald of this world was indeed weak, talentless, and incapable of using a single skill. But that was the original herald, not him, Tachibana Haru. He refused to sit idly by as his predecessor had. For that very reason, he could not give up. Just as his resolve hardened, another maid stepped between them, telling Marion that she had gone too far. The newcomer, Monica Ashton, then turned and introduced herself, announcing that as of today, she would be His Highness's personal maid. The announcement stunned him. In his memories of the game, Monica was supposed to be Alexandra's maid. Marion, equally surprised, angrily demanded an explanation, shouting that she hadn't heard anything about this change. Unfazed, Monica calmly suggested that Marion confirm the new arrangement with the headmaid. With a knowing smile, she added that she believed Marion would find her next workplace quite delightful, leaving the other maid speechless and visibly distressed. She stormed away, vowing that he would pay for this immediate dismissal. Meanwhile, Monica formally introduced herself to Harold, explaining that she would accompany him as his maid when he eventually marries the young lady. She clarified that this transfer was the young lady's decision. Still sitting on the ground, bruised from his earlier encounter, Harold reluctantly agreed. Monica extended a hand, asking him to take care of her from now on. The dismissal had been absolute. Marion demanded to know why she was being replaced, while Harold, equally bewildered, asked for an explanation. Monica calmly stated that she had reported all instances of Marion's disrespect towards the prince. With cold finality, she declared that Marion was no longer needed, leaving the other maids speechless. Stung by the declaration, Marion fled, shouting that she would never forget this. Beside Harold, Monica simply watched her depart with a subtle, knowing smile. Her attention then returned to the prince. She urged him to go back to his room so she could immediately treat his injuries. As she helped him up, Harold was struck by a realization. Monica was the first maid who had ever treated him with such kindness. Once in his chambers, Harold asked what she was doing as she began a meticulous search of the room. Monica explained she was looking for steamy items, expressing surprise that she couldn't find even one. She checked under the bed and through his belongings, but the room was bare of such things. Finding nothing, she wondered aloud if they were kept in another place. Harold insisted there was no other place and pleaded with her not to procure any unnecessary things. Monica simply informed him that, from now on, she would be the one to procure what he needs. He sighed, accepting the situation. He told Monica he would be counting on her from now on, and she replied in kind, asking him to please take care of her as well. Later, a voice from outside the window called out for Prince Harold. The call was followed by Monica, who entered as he was eating. She apologized for bothering him during his meal and relayed a message from Prince Cardis Chamberlain, an invitation to join the prince for dinner that evening. The name triggered an unpleasant memory. He recalled that before his memories of a past life returned, he had done everything possible to gain his mother's approval, which included currying favor with his older brother, Cardis. The thought of it made him break out in a cold sweat. He considers the invitation, concluding that refusing would cause a bigger problem. He decides to inform them he will join. Across from him, his brother Cardis thinks to himself that he can certainly make use of Harold for something. Driven by this new resolve, he pushes himself to his absolute limit in training, collapsing to the ground only after completing his 1,000th sword swing. Lying on the stone floor, he laments that despite having started training some time ago, he doesn't feel any stronger. The promise he made to Alexandra weighs heavily on his mind. Unseen by him, Alexandra herself looks down with a thoughtful expression. His thoughts are interrupted as she kneels beside him, commending him on his hard work. Startled, he looks up, shocked to find her there. She explains that it has been a month since their last meeting, and she was concerned it would reflect poorly on them publicly if they seemed estranged, which is why she came personally. Harold admits he hadn't even considered that, and she gently advises him to be more careful. He berates himself internally, realizing he's an idiot for getting so nervous around her that he neglected the most important thing, Alexandra herself. Meanwhile, she observes his reaction and decides there's no point in waiting. She will have to make the first move. She then asks if the Chevalier family's territory is far from the capital. Flustered, he confirms that it is, but explains that due to their engagement, he has moved into a townhouse closer to the city. Upon hearing this, she states that if he wishes to see her, she would gladly visit the castle at any time. The directness of her offer stuns him, forcing him to wonder if Alexandra could actually be interested in him. He had never imagined she would go so far. He recoils slightly, telling himself not to get the wrong idea, as this is only the second time they have met. Alexandra then points out that it appears he was practicing his sword swings until just a moment ago. Caught off guard, he stammers, trying to deflect by blaming the weather for making him feel like training. He awkwardly claims he just happened to try it out. He listened, startled, as Alexandra confessed the truth. Her actions were all to gain his approval. She admitted that she wished she could say so honestly, but this was the only way she could express it. Her words triggered a memory from a month prior, a time when he was told that as someone with no talent, no amount of effort would ever earn him acknowledgement. The recollection left him stunned in the present. The memory was of the promise he had made. Alexandra's voice echoed from the past into the present, asking if he was still doing his best to keep it. Faced with her question, he lowered his head, confessing that he had no talent and had not been putting in any real effort until now. He resolved that for the next 3 years, he would have to work harder than anyone else to remain her fiancé. His declaration was met with an unexpected offer from Alexandra. She asked if he would allow her to assist with his training. The suggestion shocked him. It was something he had only dreamed of, yet he couldn't help but wonder if she thought him incapable. He immediately refuted the notion, grabbing her shoulders and shouting that of course he didn't think that. Flustered, he tried to backtrack, explaining that he was training for his own sake and felt bad taking up her time. But Alexandra smiled gently, telling him not to worry. After all, she reminded him, she was his fiancée. Her reassurance washed over him, bringing a wide, blushing smile to his face. He could only manage a quiet, heartfelt thank you. His relief was short-lived, as Alexandra immediately suggested they have a small bout right away. Still sitting on the ground, he stared up at her in disbelief. She stood ready, sword in hand, and told him not to worry. She reminded him that he had successfully blocked her attack the last time they fought, and expressed her certainty that he would show power beyond her expectations. She leans in close to a terrified Prince Harold, her expression one of intense eagerness as she tells him to prepare himself. He is left utterly bewildered, questioning her meaning. She simply turns to leave, stating that she looks forward to seeing him again tomorrow. She pauses at the gate to clarify her intentions, confirming that she will return tomorrow. With only 3 years remaining, she insists they cannot afford to waste a single day. Her words send a jolt of panic through him. He realizes with dread that 3 years is a terrifyingly short amount of time, and if he fails to grow stronger, his future will be just as bleak as it was in the game. As he stands there, stunned, Monica steps forward and places her hands on his shoulders. Addressing Alexandra, she promises to heal His Highness's tired body and have him ready by morning, causing Harold to blush. She adds with a sly smile that she will use a hands-on and intimate approach, a suggestion that causes a flustered reaction from Alexandra. The entire situation makes Harold's stomach churn. He urges Alexandra to go home, explaining that he has a dinner invitation with Prince Cardis and will be late. Monica then points out to Alexandra that she wasn't invited anyway. Alexandra counters, suggesting that since she is already present, it wouldn't be a problem for her to join. Monica, however, shuts down the idea with a firm and unequivocal no. Frustrated by the refusal, she points an accusatory finger at a startled Prince Harold, demanding that he must tell her everything that happens at the dinner when she arrives for their training tomorrow. He nervously agrees. With his compliance secured, Monica takes charge, ushering him towards the door and telling His Highness to get ready. He acknowledges her instruction as they head inside. Upon arriving for the dinner, Harold finds the other prince already seated, his gloved hands clasped together. The prince states simply that he has been waiting, prompting a flustered Harold to immediately apologize for his tardiness. His apology hangs in the air as he looks upon the man's composed, confident face. A sudden, chilling realization strikes Harold as he identifies the imposing figure before him, Cardis Welly de Hovels, the first prince of the de Hovels kingdom. The first prince, Cardis Welly de Hovels, is a man of immense capability. He already handles political matters of national concern, making him the leading candidate to become the next king. However, despite the great power he holds through the crest of de Hovels, he is cold and devoid of humanity. He would surely stand in the way of his younger brother. He thinks of Harold as a useless little brother. Even so, Harold had once tried to act as his flunky, desperate to be acknowledged. He believed that if Cardis became king, his own mother would finally be seen for who she was, not just as a concubine. But that was all just a dream, a memory of the past. Now, in the present, Harold is bewildered. His big brother wants to have dinner with him, something that has never happened before. He questions the sudden invitation. Face to face with Cardis, the reason becomes clear. The first prince asks if it's true that Harold is engaged to the daughter of the Chevalier ducal family. Harold immediately understands. Cardis wants to gain their support through him. He internally acknowledges the truth in this political maneuvering. The Chevalier family is the strongest force among the nobility. Their backing would make it easier for Cardis to inherit the throne. But a quiet resolve forms within him. He will not flatter his brother any longer. As Cardis clicks his tongue in annoyance, a maid announces his presence just as another young man enters the room. The newcomer cheerfully greets Harold, offering congratulations on his engagement. This is the second prince, Raphael Welly de Hovels. Harold observes him, knowing that contrary to his pleasant appearance, Raphael is a very calculating man. He assesses the situation. Raphael doesn't seem to bear him any ill will at the moment. The second prince has no desire to succeed the throne, but he is fiercely devoted to his mother, the second queen, and despises the first queen for mistreating her. This is the root of his opposition to Cardis. Harold concludes that he'll be safe as long as he behaves. The pleasantries cease as Cardis turns to his brother with a sharp gaze. He asks Raphael directly if he came only to congratulate Harold. With a placid smile, Raphael counters, asking if there's some other agenda. As Harold sits stiffly at the table, Raphael cheerfully remarks on his engagement to the daughter of the Chevalier ducal family, calling it amazing and wishing he could find such a partner for himself. Harold, looking deeply uncomfortable, can only manage a terse agreement. His older brother Cardis scoffs at the notion, dismissing it as a farce. He reveals that he heard from the king and Queen Rosemary that Harold's proposal to the Duke of Chevalier was, in fact, gracefully rejected. The news leaves Harold wide-eyed with shock. Raphael interjects, musing that he would have acted more proactively had he known. He then turns the tables on Cardis, pointing out that his older brother also coveted an engagement with the Chevalier's daughter and was even prepared to break off his current engagement to secure it. Cardis calmly admits that this is true. The realization dawns on Harold with sickening clarity, his face falling into shadow. He understands now that his brothers view their fiancés as nothing more than tools to be used in their ascent to the throne. Raphael notices his distress, asking what is wrong. He forces a strained smile, apologizing profusely. Claiming to feel unwell, Harold excuses himself to leave early, thanking them for the invitation. His brothers watch him go, their expressions unreadable. Walking away down the hall, his thoughts turn inward. He reflects that ever since regaining the memories of his past life, the very concept of common sense in this world has been warped beyond recognition. Even if treating women as mere tools for success is considered normal here, he internally vows that he will not become that kind of person. A painful memory surfaces. In the world of the game, the character of Harold, desperate for recognition from his mother and brother, had hurt his beloved, Alexandra. An image of her, looking pained and clutching her chest, flashes through his mind. Clenching his fist, he solidifies his resolve. He will fight against that predetermined fate, not just for his own survival, but for the person he loves. He is determined to never see that sorrowful expression on Alexandra's face ever again. As he turns to depart, a voice calls out, "Big brother." Standing before him is the fourth prince, Wilfred Welly de Hovels. Harold recognizes him instantly as the protagonist of Engage Hazard, the one without an attribute, forsaken by God. He is known by another, less flattering title, the Tainted Prince, a name given to him because his mother was the king's mistress. He approaches Harold, stating that he heard about the engagement and came to offer congratulations. Harold, taken aback, can only wonder if his brother is sane. He recalls how, as the incompetent villainous prince, he had consistently mistreated Wilfred. His brother smiles warmly, confirming his congratulations. The friendly gesture is so unexpected that Harold internally panics, wondering if this is some kind of reconciliation route from the game that he was unaware of. The sight of the woman behind Wilfred brings a sudden, jarring realization. It is Marian, who has now become Wilfred's maid. Harold understands now why she had been so angry with him before. He observes that Marian's demeanor is completely different from when she served him. He muses that the way people treat Wilfred is even worse than how they treat him, and perhaps it's only natural for a heroine to be drawn to the protagonist. His thoughts are interrupted when Wilfred speaks, saying he must thank Harold for Marian as well. His brother explains that since Harold's engagement led to her dismissal, Marian has become his personal maid, something for which he is truly grateful. Marian blushes, affirming that thanks to Harold, she was able to serve her true master. As they walk away together in what appears to be a training yard, Harold watches them go. He comes to a quiet, firm conclusion. It seems he has no option to get along with the protagonist after all. Later, Harold recounts the entire frustrating encounter to Alexandra. Catching his breath, he listens as she fumes, declaring it outrageous that the Tainted Prince and a maid from a fallen family would treat him with such disrespect. After Harold tells her calm down, she becomes serious, stating that the best way to solidify their engagement is for him to become as strong as possible, as soon as possible. She suggests that finding a weapon better suited to him should be his priority. Harold considers this. In the world of the game, his original weapon was a spear. But now, for his own path, he has decided on something else. He will use a shield. He announces that the weapon he has chosen, after brooding over it for the past month, is a shield. Alexandra listens, her expression thoughtful as she processes his unconventional choice. She listens as Harold explains his choice. He recalls that in the game, in Haza, the shield was a weapon for characters with low defense who relied on magic. However, the true, deciding factor for him was much simpler. His most beloved person had praised him for it. Her smile is gentle as she calls it a wonderful choice. She assures him that one day, he will surely be known as an impregnable fortress. Moved by her words, he takes her hands, his face flushed with determination. He vows that he will definitely make her stronger. Taking his vow as a cue, Alexandra declares their break over. She announces that his shield training will begin right away, much to his sudden dismay. He can only plead for her to be gentle. 3 months of grueling training pass. Harold lies on the ground, utterly spent, gasping for breath. Alexandra, though winded herself, commends his vast improvement, stating that with his current skill, no ordinary person could inflict even a single wound upon him. He feels as though he might melt from exhaustion. Despite undergoing hellish training day after day, from being chased by demonic beasts to climbing the palace towers, he internally laments that he still cannot block even 20% of her attacks. She tells him to be more confident. With a hint of pride, she reveals that even among the skilled members of the Chevalier family, only Monica is capable of blocking her sword, and even then, only a fraction of the time. This news brings a smug look to Harold's face. His smugness quickly fades into concern. He asks if it is truly all right for her to dedicate every day to his training, worried she might be neglecting her own lessons. Alexandra simply tells him not to worry about it. He presses the point, reminding her not to underestimate a former college student, referencing his past life's knowledge about the importance of academics. Caught off guard, she can only hesitantly agree. With that, Alexandra announces the end of their training for the day, instructing him to take care of the equipment tomorrow. From his collapsed position on the floor, Harold can only muster a tired agreement. He watched as Alexandra, still in her training attire, noted that her breastplate had been essential. As she turned to go get changed, his eyes inadvertently followed, catching him by surprise. His flustered reaction did not go unnoticed. Marion appeared beside him, whispering with a sly smile that it seemed he was in for a very productive night, causing him to cry out in shock. A short while later, as Marion served tea to Alexandra, he sat stewing in embarrassment, thinking to himself that only a certain kind of person would say such a thing. Marion, meanwhile, simply giggled to herself. Once composed and changed into his formal attire, Harold announced his intention to find a shield that suited him. When Alexandra inquired further, he declared with unwavering confidence that the most fitting shield for him was the jet-black shield, Kasparig, startling both her and Marion. Her expression grew serious. Alexandra spoke frankly, explaining that Kasparig is an item obtained by defeating a demonic beast on Morn Island. She warned that not even 1,000 soldiers would be a match for it, and pleaded with him to reconsider, stating that with his current abilities, he would only be throwing his life away. He remained resolute, insisting that Kasparig was the only choice. He explained that it was the highest rarity shield he could use, obtainable by defeating the mid-boss of the same name. He detailed its unique skill, Snatch, which allowed for long-range attacks with Claws of Darkness, could steal items, and possessed a high instant death activation rate. He acknowledged that he was asking the impossible and couldn't succeed without their help. But before he could finish, Alexandra interrupted, her voice filled with emotion. It wasn't the difficulty of the request that troubled her. She was simply worried about it. Her earnest concern left him momentarily speechless, a tense silence settling between them. With a heavy sigh, she relented. She agreed to help, but on 2 conditions. He was not to attempt the impossible, and in battle, he must follow her orders to the letter. Overjoyed, Harold immediately accepted her terms, and so their quest began. The trio arrived on a lush, tropical shore. Shielding his eyes from the sun, Harold surveyed the landscape, confirming their arrival on Morn Island. He and his companions are immediately confronted by a small, spiky black cat. It declares that from this point on is the boss's territory, threatening to kill them if they dare take another step forward. His eyes widen in realization, suspecting this creature might be Kasparig. Alexandra, however, is filled with doubt, remarking that Kasparig is supposed to be a large lion, not a lovely little kitten. Marion quietly agrees. The cat bristles at their skepticism, puffing up its chest and insisting that the boss is incredibly strong and frightening, demanding they tremble in fear. Ignoring its bluster, he swiftly scoops the creature into his arms. The cat yelps in surprise, demanding to know what he's doing as he holds it close and asks directly, "Are you really that Kasparig?" The creature, now confirmed to be Kasparig, smirks, acknowledging that they saw through its disguise. Harold cuts to the chase, asking what it knows about the jet-black shield of the same name. Its expression turns cunning. Kasparig offers to share information, but only if they perform a task for it first. They must tear apart a scoundrel that has encroached upon its territory. Harold, however, flatly refuses the deal. When a shocked Kasparig asks why he would refuse when he wants the shield, Harold coolly replies that he has a mountain of things he wants, implying this task is not worth his time. His rejection causes the cat's confident facade to crumble. With drooping ears, Kasparig reflects on its own legend, realizing that for a demonic beast so feared to resort to asking humans for help, something must have happened that is truly beyond its control. As the beast despairs, Alexandra confers with Marion. She states firmly that what is important to her is her own life and the lives of those she holds precious, adding that she has no leeway to care about the needs of a demonic beast. Marion then proposes a compromise. She believes it would be best to first investigate this scoundrel to see what they are up against. She confidently assures Alexandra that with the 2 of them together, no monster poses a risk, and they can retreat immediately if it proves too dangerous. Harold is stunned by the suggestion, while Kasparig appears to agree with the plan. They followed the small cat, who announced that their quarry was just ahead. Before them lay a grotesque, fat sow. The color of its body was a pure, snowy white, but in stark contrast, its eyes had been crudely sewn shut. As they took in the sight of the creature, the remains of a sacred beast, once a divine messenger, now known as the gluttonous beast, Hinwan, Alexandra immediately urged Prince Harold to retreat. But before they could act, Kasparig lunged forward with a cry of vengeance, vowing to avenge its mother. The small cat was swatted aside, letting out a pained yell. He watched the small beast fall, his mind racing. What should he do? If he abandoned Kasparig, he wouldn't get the shield, and his entire survival plan would be back to square one. Yet he realized he did have one more plan remaining, one that didn't rely on the shield at all. He knew it would have been easier to give up, to simply go along with the flow as he had before. But for that very reason, he made his choice. Stepping forward, Harold roared at the massive sow, demanding it get its filthy foot off of Kasparov. The chaotic battle against the monstrous Sao, Hinwon, rages on. Prince Harold braces with his shield against the beast's immense form, while Alexandra strikes from the side. Above them, Marion is flung through the air, a testament to the creature's raw power. As Hinwon lets out a guttural roar, Alexandra pauses, a soft smile on her face. She reflects that Harold's actions were not courage, but simple recklessness. Yet, she admits to herself, that is precisely the side of him she loves so much, calling him a hopelessly awkward person. Her thoughts are interrupted as Marion sighs in exasperation, lamenting that she must continue to serve such a master. Flustered by their proximity and comments, Harold's demeanor suddenly shifts. He pulls Kasparov close, a look of fierce determination in his eyes, and declares that they will defeat the pig together. He shouts that it is their turn now and urges Kasparov onward. The cat agrees as Harold charges forward, shield raised. He knows from experience that Hinwon's attacks are heavy, but having faced Alexandra's lightning-fast assaults day after day, he finds the beast's movements far too slow. He realizes all he needs to do is block and wait for an opening. From a distance, both Alexandra and Marion observe, concurring that the creature is indeed slow. As Hinwon bellows and swings a massive leg, Marion cries out a warning. Harold intercepts, shouting that he won't let the attack through. The blow connects with his shield with devastating force, sending him flying backward with a cry of pain. He crashes to the ground, groaning. Alexandra rushes to his side, asking if he is all right. He confirms that he is, but grimaces, admitting that his current equipment has reached its limit. Seeing this, Marion resolves to stall the beast herself. His mind races. He understands that while he can block the attacks, he lacks the strength to withstand the impact without being thrown. He needs a better defense. At the very least, he thinks, if he could just use the jet black shield. His gaze falls upon Kasparov. Looking intently at the cat, he gently pats its head. With a serious expression, he states clearly, "My name is Harold. Not human." Having made his formal introduction, he looks at the small creature with desperation. "Hey," he begins, "where's the jet black shield, Kasparov?" He stared intently at the battle raging before him, where Marion fought desperately against the beast Hinwon. If only he had the shield, he was certain he could defeat it. In the distance, Marion cried out for Monica, who seemed to be in peril. He turned his desperate plea to the small black cat beside him. "Kasparov," he called out, but the creature looked away, sweating with hesitation. The cat finally relented with a sigh, a dark aura beginning to emanate from its body. It agreed, but with a stern condition. No matter what kind of shield appeared, Harold must not betray it. As the dark energy swirled and then vanished, a large, ornate shield materialized in the air. Harold, sitting on the ground, could only stare in shock at its sudden appearance. His surprise turned to disbelief as the shield rapidly shrank, stopping at a size no larger than a smartphone. He cried out, aghast at the minuscule object floating before him. He finally understood Kasparov's reluctance. The cat explained that it couldn't be helped. Unlike its mother, it was still a child and lacked sufficient mana. This tiny shield was the absolute best it could produce. As he processed this, a strange display materialized, showing his status. Under the entry for mana, it simply read, "Doesn't exist." The text noted that in this world, abilities were determined by HP and SP. Seeing this, Kasparov asked what mana was, leaving Harold utterly confused. He stammered that he didn't have anything like mana, which shocked Kasparov, who wondered how humans could live without it. An image of Alexandra appeared in his mind, explaining that mana is the life force of every living being and is essential for using a blessing or gift. At that moment, Harold understood. In this world, what he knew as SP and skills were called mana and blessings. With this new understanding, a sly smile crossed his face. He asked Kasparov if mana could be transferred, and the cat confirmed it could receive mana from others. Kasparov grew frantic, realizing Harold's intent. It warned that creating a proper jet black shield would require an enormous amount of mana, and taking that much would cause Harold to collapse. Unconcerned, Harold told the cat to take as much as it wanted. He cut off any further protest, yelling at Kasparov to hurry. The cat could only look on in shock, protesting that he hadn't listened to the dire warning. He grabs Monica's arm, warning her not to blame him for what happens next. With a click of her tongue, Monica dismisses the creature as a mere pig. As she leaps onto the beast's back, sword raised, Harold cries out her name in alarm. Meanwhile, Alexandra grits her teeth, her resolve hardening. She declares that she will not allow the beast to lay a hand on the one who is precious to her, even as Hinwon lets out a deafening roar. Seeing their unified front, Harold rushes forward, asking if they are all right. He instructs them to use the opening they've created to halt Hinwon's attacks. With confident smiles, both Alexandra and Monica agree, telling him to leave it to them. He then turns his attention to the power now at his command. In this world, known as Manhwa, all weapons except for shields add to the wielder's attack power. A grin spreads across his face as he marvels at the incredible ability he now possesses. This power manifests as the jet black shield. Unlike other equipment, it adds directly to defensive power, an effect that is doubled if the wielder shares its attribute. Its defensive capability is now comparable to that of a fully leveled, top-tier protector. With this knowledge, his confidence surges. He realizes that this immense defensive power is precisely why even he stands a chance of withstanding Henwen's attacks. As he comes to this realization, Monica and Alexandra launch a coordinated aerial assault, striking the beast simultaneously. Henwen squeals in pain, and Harold watches in shock, a flicker of recognition in his eyes as he observes their movements. He senses the imminent danger and roars for them to get behind him at once. Henwen's massive jaws open, gathering a swirling energy for a devastating attack. The tyrant's breath. The beast unleashes its power in a torrent of destructive energy. Harold plants his feet, taking the full brunt of the blast. He cries out in agony, his body straining against the force, but his will does not break. He is determined to protect them. The immense pressure continues to bear down on him, but he holds his ground. Behind the shimmering defense of his shield, Monica and Alexandra watch in horror, calling out his name. As the torrent of energy finally subsides, Harold stands firm, a triumphant smirk on his face, having endured the attack. He looks up from the ground to see Alexandra standing over him, her sword held ready. With a gentle smile, she commends him for his efforts, assuring him that she will handle the rest. Her gentle expression vanishes, replaced by a cold fury. She vows that the insolent sow who dared to torment her fiancé will be bathed in blood. With a sharp command for him to act, she declares it is time to teach the beast some manners. Harold stares, taken aback by the sudden, intense shift he sees in her eyes. In an instant, she lunges, her blade flashing through the air. A deep gash opens across Henwen's side, and dark blood erupts from the wound as the beast recoils. As the massive beast lies bleeding on the ground, Harold turns his attention to the task at hand. He calls out to Kasper, declaring that it is time to avenge his mother. The black cat materializes before him, questioning how this is possible. Kasper explains that the power sleeping within Harold is his own. From the jet-black shield, a shadowy, spectral form of the cat lunges forward, its claws extended. The spectral form sinks its claws into Henwen's massive body. This is the unique skill of the jet-black shield, Snatch. It steals everything from its target, even its very life force. The gluttonous beast begins to wither as its vitality is drained away. With the battle concluded and the beast vanquished, the group gathers before a crude gravestone marking a final resting place. Harold kneels, placing a hand gently upon the stone, a silent acknowledgement of what was lost. He looks over to see Kasper, eyes closed, murmuring that he has finally done it, a message for his mother. Harold then quietly asks the cat if he remembers their promise. The cat grows agitated, questioning how Harold plans to handle another demonic beast without any mana to sustain his power. With a confident smirk, Harold notes Kasper's unease and declares it's time for the finisher. The cat stares in disbelief, a sudden realization dawning on him. He asks if Harold is referring to him as his partner. Harold calmly points out that there is no one else. He explains that while he may not possess mana himself, there is plenty of it inside him for Kasper to use. He continued, a confident smile spreading across his face as he posed a question to the stunned Kasper. Didn't this mean that together, they could become even stronger? With a playful wink, he added that besides, Kasper was the only weapon he could truly wield. Extending his fist, Harold declared that he was counting on him from now on, calling him partner. After a moment's consideration, Kasper reasoned that Harold would be useless without him and agreed to help. The small cat then bumped his paw against Harold's knuckles, a slight blush on his cheeks as he quietly repeated the word, partner. Alexandra, her face flushed with excitement, turns to her maid. Did you see that, Monica? Prince Harold's majestic figure, she exclaims. Beside her, Monica covers her mouth, a quiet, knowing laugh escaping her. She replies that she did see it, but then poses a question to her mistress. Oh, Desoma, Monica begins. If you had gone it seriously from the start, wouldn't you have killed it instantly? Alexandra closes her eyes, conceding the point. Her maid continues, explaining that it was all because he blocked that final blow. She notes that there was no madness in his eyes, despite facing the ever-growing Henwan, a beast stronger than him. The thought of the danger he was in causes Alexandra to cry out in distress. Monica's expression softens. She acknowledges that Henwen is a monster powerful enough to require the mobilization of the entire royal army, and yet His Highness still managed to defeat it. With a small, knowing smile, she admits she can now understand why her mistress is so infatuated with him. A pleased, almost smug expression crosses Alexandra's face as she considers another point. And now His Highness and Kasper are working together, aren't they? She muses with a quiet laugh. Her observation prompts Monica to sigh and point out, but you were very fond of him from the start, weren't you? Flustered, Alexandra protests that he was fond of her as well, even as an image of Harold and Kasper forming their partnership comes to mind. She gazes into the distance, a soft, reminiscent smile on her face. It's already been 7 years since His Highness saved me, hasn't it? The history of the kingdom is rooted in myth and power. The de Havil's kingdom was founded by a great dragon, and to this day, the royal family continues to receive its affection and favor. This favor is not exclusive. The dragon bestows its grace upon the current royal family, the de Havils, and also upon the Chevalier family. A long time has passed since the founding of the country, and this profound secret, the dual favor of the dragon, is a truth known only to a select few, a number that can be counted on one hand. As the conversation continues, Monica asserts that among the Chevalier family, Alexandra is the only true dragon. She recalls how Prince Harold sought the dragon's favor, and Alexandra's acceptance of his handkerchief was seen as an agreement to become mates. However, Monica privately believes the prince doesn't remember the gesture at all. Despite this, Alexandra holds the handkerchief to her chest with a confident smirk, declaring that she is fine with the situation as it is. She reflects that it may have taken her 6 years to reach this point. The Chevalier family's creed is that strength is justice, and the divine dragon-slaying sword, Balmung, is granted only to the one who stands at the very top. With a serene expression, she vows that from now on, she will be able to protect His Highness by his side. Monica finds this dedication admirable, acknowledging the hard work Alexandra has put in for 6 years just to protect her chosen mate. As the wielder of Balmung, Alexandra's authority is absolute, surpassing even her father or her elder brother, Cedric. Alexandra's gaze sharpens as she considers a new threat. Now that Prince Harold's abilities are becoming known, scoundrels will surely try to harm him. With a sigh, Monica confirms that this is precisely why Alexandra placed her by the prince's side. Alexandra affirms this, telling Monica that she is counting on her. Her mate accepts the duty without hesitation, promising to protect everything, not just Alexandra, but also Prince Harold, the one who called her precious. She vows to do so for his sake, even if it costs her life. Meanwhile, in another room, Prince Harold sits at a table with Kasparig. The small cat is enthusiastically eating, prompting Harold to comment that he's eating too much. Kasparig, in turn, marvels at the delicious food Harold always gets to eat. He offers Kasparig another spoonful, remarking that he's getting used to this. He explains that after their battle, Kasparig suggested they use nicknames as partners, and so they now call each other Hal and Cass. This development, however, has deeply unsettled Alexandra. She trembles with jealousy, her face obscured by shadow, furious that Kasparig managed to call Prince Harold by nickname before she, his own fiancée, could. Harold recalls how Alexandra was sulking about the nicknames, then mentally corrects himself, noting that he now calls her Xandra. He thinks to himself how incredibly cute she is, no matter how many times he remembers the moment. Nearby, Alexandra puffs her cheeks out in a pout as Monica watches with a smile. He sat at the table, startled, as Monica began to speak. The truth is, she started, prompting him to ask what she meant. Kasparig sat beside his plate, observing. The news sent him stumbling backward, Kasparig clinging to his back for dear life. He stammered in agreement as Alexandra, now with him, calmly processed the information, musing aloud about a party hosted by the Marshall family. He began to protest, but she continued her explanation. The Marshall ducal family, she elaborated, was founded by the previous king's younger brother who had renounced his royal status. Tracing their roots, they were formerly royalty, making it impolite to refuse their invitation. Despite her reasoning, he threw his head back in despair, wailing that he did not want to go. His primary fear was encountering Cardis there. The situation was further complicated by a crucial fact. Frederica, the eldest daughter of the Marshall family, was also Cardis's fiancée. She then revealed, with a hint of bashfulness, that she had also received an invitation. It appeared the Marshalls wished to meet them together, now that their engagement was known. With a determined look, she declared her excitement to meet her future siblings-in-law, much to his surprise. He slowly began to understand. So that's it, he murmured, realizing it was natural for them to be curious, given that they were all expected to live in the royal palace as family in the future. Seeing his contemplation, Alexandra asked what his decision would be. As he considered his options with arms crossed, she made her own position clear. She stated firmly that they should attend. More than just a social obligation, she wanted to confirm for herself just what kind of person Frederica was. Harold's mind races, his face flushing crimson. He processes the situation in a panic. Xandra is inviting him to a party, and she wants him to be her escort. The implication of it being a date sends him into a flustered spiral. He struggles to form a coherent sentence, stammering as he tries to ask if she would like to go with him. Overwhelmed but determined, he decides to push through his nervousness and just say it. In response to his hesitation, Alexandra firmly grasps his hands, her own face blushing as she insists they should absolutely go together. Harold can only manage a meek agreement. Internally, Alexandra berates herself for her awkward invitation, calling herself an idiot. Later, dressed in his formal princely attire, Harold stands beside a waiting carriage, a worried expression on his face as he wonders if this is truly all right. In the background, Monica announces that she will be off. As he stands by the open carriage door, a voice calls out his name, stopping him in his tracks. He turns, his eyes wide and his face still flushed with nervous anticipation. The voice belongs to Alexandra, now dressed in a breathtakingly elegant gown. She smiles gently and thanks him for coming to pick her up. Struck by her appearance, Harold is momentarily speechless, thinking to himself that her cuteness is simply to die for. Inside the carriage, however, the atmosphere has grown heavy. Alexandra sits with her head bowed, tears streaming down her face, while Harold looks down in silence, a somber expression on his own. Breaking the tense silence, Harold leans forward with a gentle smile, calling her name. He presents a small, wrapped box, offering it to her as a memento for their evening together. She looks up, her expression softening as she takes the box. She asks if she might be allowed to open it right away, and Harold gives his immediate, cheerful consent. Alexandra opens the gift to reveal a stunningly beautiful and intricate hair ornament, sparkling in the light. Her eyes widen in wonder, and she whispers that it's beautiful. She touches the new ornament in her hair, asking if it suits her. Harold, blushing, explains that he chose it because the color reminded him of her eyes. Overcome with emotion, she covers her face with her hands. Her gratitude is sincere as she thanks him for such a wonderful hair accessory. He stammers in reply, insisting that it suits her very well. He watches her, internally questioning if she truly likes the gift. He thinks to himself that he's glad he asked Monica for help, admitting his own lack of fashion sense, and recalling that she had said some rather harsh things about his initial ideas. Her warm smile provides the answer he was looking for. A profound realization washes over him. She has accepted him, the one known as the incompetent, villainous prince. She clarifies that her feelings are not simply because she is his fiancée. That alone isn't enough to explain it. She feels she has already received so much from him. In response, Harold quietly asks why she would ever accept someone like him, but quickly dismisses the question as a joke, claiming he lacks the courage to truly ask. The intimate moment is interrupted as she announces their arrival. With a small smile, she asks him to take her hand, and he accepts with a quiet thank you. They step into a grand hall, bustling with people. Harold observes that, as expected of the Marshall family, the guest list is quite extensive. Around them, other attendees begin to murmur, wondering about the identity of the mysterious person accompanying the princess. His gaze sweeps across the room and lands on a familiar face. He is surprised to see the fourth prince, Wilfred, and wonders what could have brought him here. Noticing his sudden tension, Alexandra asks if something is the matter. He reassures her, advising that there is no need to interact with Wilfred. He promises that if his brother says anything, he will simply let it slide, so she shouldn't worry. Just then, an attendant announces the entrance of the first prince, Cardis, and Frederica Marshall. The woman, Frederica, is revealed to be one of the heroines from Manhwa, and Harold internally marvels at her beauty. Alexandra misinterprets his stare, assuming he has a preference for such women, a notion he hastily denies. Frederica approaches them, thanking them for their presence before turning her full attention to Alexandra, expressing her pleasure at finally meeting her. At the party, Frederica Marshall approaches Harold and Alexandra. She notes that she heard the two of them had gotten engaged. As Alexandra gives a polite bow, Harold formally thanks Frederica for the invitation. Frederica acknowledges this, stating that Alexandra managed to get engaged to a very wonderful person, and it's all thanks to her. However, her expression twists into a malicious smile as she adds that seeing how rude Harold was to her earlier makes her feel like being a little mean. Alexandra flinches at the sudden change in tone. With a light laugh, she excuses herself, claiming to be in the middle of greeting another guest. As she departs, Harold mutters a quiet thanks, prompting a confused Alexandra to ask what he is thankful for. Their exchange is interrupted by a new voice. Monica, standing beside the fourth prince, Wilfred, addresses Harold familiarly as Big Brother Harold. Harold turns to face them, bluntly asking what they want. Wilfred replies smoothly that he saw Harold from afar and simply came to offer his greetings. Dismissively, Harold tells him to enjoy the party and not to mind him, but Monica asks him to wait. Wilfred leans in closer, a sly smile on his face, and pointedly asks if Harold isn't the least bit curious as to why he was invited. Harold, looking annoyed, insists he has no particular curiosity and attempts to lead Alexandra away. The tense atmosphere prompts Alexandra to intervene. Looking downcast, she asks Harold to excuse her for a while, stating her need to go freshen up. Wilfred and Monica watch her depart with unreadable expressions. He watches her walk away, agreeing to her request. Internally, Harold notes with concern that Alexandra's mood has clearly changed ever since Wilfred appeared. He continues to ponder the situation, acknowledging that she has always been difficult to discern. A troubling thought crosses his mind. He wonders if it's possible she will fall for Wilfred, just as she did in Ainhaza. His thoughts are cut short by the arrival of yet another brother. Cardis approaches with a smirk, remarking that Harold has been caught by him, of all people, and asking if he has been enjoying himself. He is immediately questioned by his brother, Cardis, who casually asks if he is aware that their other brother, Wilfred, is also in attendance. Before Harold can fully react, Cardis laughs and reveals a surprising truth. The king himself had asked him to bring Wilfred into his faction. The news visibly shocks him. Cardis continues to explain that His Majesty was concerned about Wilfred's circumstances, noting that he doesn't have a proper place in the palace. He lays out the political strategy, explaining that the king cannot openly support Wilfred because of Alexandra's mother. Therefore, the king chose Cardis to act as a shield, placing Wilfred under his protection so that no one would dare to move against him. Cardis adds that the purpose of the party is to make this new arrangement public. He then slyly questions Harold, noting that he was unusually slow to respond to the Marshall family's invitation this time, and that he had assumed Harold already knew what was happening. Leaning in close, he whispers that from now on, Harold should also start taking care of their pitiful little brother, as is his duty. With a final farewell, he turns to leave. As his brother departs, Harold's attention snaps to Alexandra, who calls his name. He sees her looking unwell as her maid, Monica, asks if something is wrong. A flurry of thoughts reveals the shared confusion over the king's motives. Cardus admits he doesn't understand the high-risk move, and Alexandra wonders what their father could be thinking. Harold, however, concludes that the king must have struck a deal and seems to be enjoying the situation. Back in the present moment, Alexandra asks him directly how he plans to interact with Wilfred from now on. Internally, Harold's mind is already made up. He will do nothing. His face hidden by shadows, he internally declares that whatever his brother and Wilfred do is none of his business. He wants nothing to do with him, ever. He then bitterly acknowledges this feeling as jealousy, reasoning that it is only natural for Alexandra to love the protagonist of the story, Wilfred. He resolved that this was the only course of action he could take. Across from him, Alexandra let out a soft chuckle, a thoughtful finger resting on her lips as she questioned his certainty. He felt a pang of pity for Alexandra, knowing she wished to be involved, but he couldn't allow it. Her use of the word something echoed in his mind as he watched her stand alone on the balcony, a solitary figure with a troubled posture. His confusion mounting, he hesitantly asked if she had some sort of relationship with Wilfred. Alexandra's demeanor hardened instantly. She confessed that the person she despised most in the world was Wilfred, declaring that even tearing him limb from limb would not be enough to satisfy her hatred. Her voice dripped with venom as she spat that Wilfred was absolute scum. The sheer intensity of her fury left Harold speechless, only able to stammer out a question of why. He recognized the look on her face. It was the same one she wore just after the protagonist had condemned it. The rage vanished from her features as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a serene smile. She gently asked if he, Halsema, perhaps remembered that day from 7 years prior. He could only stare back, still processing the sudden shift. She proposed they speak of the past, of a story from that day, 7 years ago. With her eyes closed, she recounted how on that day, he had saved everything that mattered to her, her mind, her heart, her dignity, and her very soul. As she spoke, he looked down at their hands, now clasped together on the balcony railing. 7 years in the past, a young Alexandra lived a quiet life. Frail since childhood, she spent her days confined to her home, gazing out the window. While other children of her age played together, her only adventures were found within the pages of books, exploring fantastical worlds through stories. Then, one day, her father approached her with a troubled expression, delivering unexpected news. She would no longer be brought to the royal palace. He explained that King Dehavels had proposed her as a candidate for his son's fiancée. Her father had tried to refuse, citing her delicate health, but his pleas were not heard. Hearing this, young Alexandra looked down, apologizing for being a burden, before looking up with a gentle, tearful smile. In the present, Alexandra recounts this memory to Prince Harold. She confesses that, at the time, the thought of visiting the capital for the first time was even more exciting than the prospect of meeting a prince, making her heart pound. Returning to the past, a maid attends to the young Alexandra, who stares at her reflection in disbelief. Dressed in a boy's checkered vest and shorts, she questions the attire. The maid simply confirms that these are her lady's orders, leaving Alexandra to wonder why she must dress this way to meet her potential fiancé. The older Alexandra explains the peculiar strategy to Harold. She reveals it was her father's idea, believing that if she were disguised as a boy, the princes would be less likely to take any notice of her. Upon arriving at the royal palace for the first time, young Alexandra is completely mesmerized by its splendor. The glittering halls are beyond anything she had read about in her books. Forgetting her father's warnings, she steals away to explore the vast palace on her own. She wanders deeper, feeling like the hero of a story. But as she proceeds down a long, empty corridor, the lack of people becomes unsettling. Her excitement gives way to anxiety, and she freezes in place, unable to move. Just then, a voice calls out, and she looks up to see another boy standing before her. He approaches, correctly guessing that she is lost, and offers to show her the way. Startled, Alexandra scrambles to her feet, flusteredly insisting she is fine and can stand on her own. She shakes her head vigorously, denying that she was lost. The boy calmly asks for her name. After a moment of hesitation, she gives her answer, Alex. He looks at her thoughtfully, seeming to accept the name without question. The prince with light hair stops the child, who is walking away, and calls out for him to wait. He then introduces himself as Harold Welly Dehavels, the third prince of the nation, as the real, dark-haired Harold looks on from a distance. The child, Alex, continues to search anxiously, realizing with dismay that he can't find who he's looking for and feels he's only getting farther from his starting point. The prince who called himself Harold watches him, humming thoughtfully, his worry growing. Alex explains that he feels like he's been walking for over half an hour. He tells the prince that his father is supposed to be in the room the king always uses for audiences with the nobility and begins to question if they are truly heading in the right direction. The prince, however, smiles with confidence. He reassures Alex that his own father is there as well, so there can be no mistake. Stopping before a large door, he declares that this is the place and, with a charming grin, invites Alex to open it. Calling out for his father, Alex throws the heavy door open. The sight that greets him causes him to freeze instantly, his face a mask of utter shock and disbelief. A young boy with short, light-colored hair weeps in distress. From a doorway above, another child's voice taunts him, calling him a fool and addressing him as Your Highness Harold. The voice then gives a command. Listen well, his name is Harold, and if he is to resent someone, he must resent Harold. He pounds on a heavy wooden door, pleading for it to be opened. Realizing he's been tricked, he collapses in his sobs, crying out that this was not supposed to be a game and that he hates princes. Alone in the dark room, he wonders what to do. He crawls towards a sliver of light beneath the curtain, calling out to see if anyone is there and desperately pleading for help. Slumped against the wall, he begins to lose hope, wondering if he might die there. Just then, a voice from the other side of the door asks who is there. The boy scrambles to his feet, explaining that he's been locked in and begging for help. The voice, belonging to a young Harold, tells him to wait and to move away from the door. A moment later, a deafening metallic clang reverberates as the door shakes violently. The boy watches, wide-eyed and startled, as Harold begins to force his way in from the outside. The door finally bursts open, revealing Harold peering into the room with a concerned expression. He asks the boy, who is still kneeling on the floor, if he is all right. Overwhelmed with relief, the boy rushes forward and embraces Harold, sobbing that he was terrified. Harold, though taken aback, gently pats his back and apologizes, saying he wishes he could have come sooner. After they have both settled down, Harold asks if he's feeling calmer. The boy nods. Harold offers him a handkerchief, assuring him that he doesn't have to cry anymore. After a quiet thank you, Harold gently prompts him, asking what exactly happened. The boy begins to recount his ordeal, his head bowed. He explains that he had been told to come to this room, and as soon as he entered, he was locked inside. He continues, his voice filled with the memory of the event. He tells Harold that the last thing the person said to him was, "If you are to resent someone, resent this Harold." He stood in contemplation, a finger resting on his cheek, as Raphael posed a question. Did he know of Lord Harold? The young prince seemed to search for the right words, murmuring aloud as he considered how to answer. His contemplation was shattered by a sudden, jarring realization. With a wide, unnerving grin, he declared that his own name was, in fact, Harold. The revelation struck Raphael with immense force, leaving him utterly flabbergasted and shouting in disbelief. Before Raphael could process the statement, his shock turned to terror. He screamed as a massive wooden crate, dislodged from somewhere above, plummeted directly towards the unsuspecting Harold, who looked up just as it was about to crash down upon him. Beneath the collapsed structure, a young boy with short blonde hair notices Harold de Hovels is unwell, asking what's wrong. Harold, sweating and grimacing in pain, dismisses his concern, insisting it's nothing. The boy covers his mouth in shock as Harold struggles to reassure him. While in the background, the boy's father watches with a knowing smile. The man rushes forward, calling out for Alexandra and asking if she is there. Seeing the two trapped, he asks if they're all right. His son immediately calls out to his father, pleading for him to quickly help Harold. After being freed, the father asks if they are both okay. Harold, now standing and appearing perfectly fine, cheerfully announces that he will be going. The boy is stunned, pointing out that Harold was just injured. He then runs into his father's arms. His son questions why he is letting Harold leave, but the man simply tells him to let it be. Sometime later, Harold stands with Alexandra on a balcony. The boy is seen alone, clutching a playing card with a determined expression. There, Alexandra explains that she now understands Harold's position within the royal palace, and why her father stopped her that day. She continues, acknowledging that he is not only royalty, but also possesses the de Hovels crest, a power exclusive to his family. Harold reflects on this, realizing that no one ever tried to see his true self, viewing him only as an unrecognized entity. He thinks about how the real Harold is actually strong, kind, and overflowing with talent. With a determined look, Alexandra clutches the fabric over her heart, declaring that it was for this reason she sought strength. She gently takes his hand, smiling as she tells him she is by his side to repay him for saving her. Harold looks back at her, his eyes wide with emotion. Standing before Alexandra's family, Harold makes a solemn vow. He declares that he is by no means the incompetent, evil prince of rumor. He stood before Alexandra, holding her hands gently. She expressed her gratitude, telling him that he was the one who had saved her, and that he was an irreplaceable ally to her. Her eyes welled with tears of joy as she looked up at him, a radiant smile on her face. She confessed that becoming his fiancée brought her true happiness. Her words overwhelmed him. As she moved to embrace him on the balcony, Harold's composure finally broke, and a choked sob escaped his lips. He wept openly in her arms, the weight of his isolation finally lifting. A profound realization struck him. She had known his true meaning, known that he was called the incompetent, evil prince, and yet she was the only one who had always looked at him and seen him for who he truly was. Harold, flustered, rubs his face against his gloved hand, muttering that this isn't about being embarrassed. Below, Alexandra watches him with a knowing, gentle smile. Her smile vanishes, replaced by a look of intense seriousness. She addresses Harold directly, explaining that Wilfred Welly de Hovels had tried to use her, acknowledging her only for his own purposes. She declares that she finds that man detestable. Harold stares, wide-eyed and speechless at her sudden declaration. She continues, questioning Wilfred's motives for such an act. Then, with unwavering resolve, she points a finger and declares that she has already decided to dedicate everything to Harold's cause. He remains silent, contemplating her words. His mind drifts back, realizing that at that point in time, he hadn't even had any contact with Wilfred. He concludes that, regardless, it would be best to avoid the man entirely. Bringing his attention back to the present, Alexandra assures him that he has no need to concern himself with such matters. Her expression softens as she makes a request. Should the time come to confront that man, she asks that Harold consider entrusting the task to her. The suggestion leaves him blushing and stammering for a moment before he collects himself, takes her hand, and suggests it's about time they return. As she leads the way, her grip on his hand tightens reassuringly. A faint blush on his cheeks, he quietly offers his thanks. They proceed through the grand hall, their presence together, turning heads, and sparking murmurs among the assembled guests. He remarks that he believed his obligations for the evening were complete, but she firmly disagrees, stating it's far too early to return. The realization dawns on him that she has no intention of leaving just yet, and he begins to wonder what she might be planning. He then proposes that if they are to stay longer, they should visit the royal palace afterward. He explains that he wants to discuss the day's events with Monica and Kasparig. The suggestion catches Alexandra completely by surprise. He sees Alexandra's flustered reaction. She agrees that they must return at once, urging him to hurry. In response to her urgency, he frantically tries to stop her, insisting they can't just leave without at least informing the host. She seems to think they have no time for such pleasantries. His gaze then drifts across the crowded room, and his eyes lock onto a familiar group. His brothers, Wilfred and Raphael, standing with Monica and Mary. The group is laughing together, Wilfred boisterously, Raphael with a smug smile, and Marion covering a giggle. Harold watches them, his expression turning grim as he murmurs in understanding. Suddenly, he feels a distinct tug on his cape, and hears Kasparig call his name. Looking down, he sees the small cat asking if he's finally been released from the party, telling him not to make such a terrible face. Kasparig then notes that it's the first time he's seen Harold talking with Alexandra, remarking that for someone on a mission, he seems to be enjoying himself. Before he can respond, Alexandra's voice cuts in, chiding him for scowling like a demon and drawing the attention of the other guests. She offers a quick apology on his behalf. Her demeanor then softens as she gently takes his hand. With a warm expression, she asks him to listen and questions if he was angry because of what she had said. Flustered, he denies it, though he internally panics, realizing she has seen right through him. The moment is broken by Prince Raphael's voice from behind them. He calls out to Alexandra, asking if she and Harold are already leaving, causing them both to turn in surprise. Harold is stunned into silence, captivated by the sight of a smiling young man with light-colored hair. He internally marvels at how lovely Alexandra's voice is before the question forms in his mind. Who is this person? The young man greets Alexandra warmly, calling her his sister. The realization hits Harold with the force of a physical blow, and he exclaims in shock, "Brother." He introduces himself to Harold as Cedric, Alexandra's older brother, and extends a hand. Harold, flustered, introduces himself as the fiancé and accepts the handshake, only to have his hand caught in a crushing grip. Cedric's smile remains, but his eyes glint with malice as Harold cries out in pain. Maintaining his smile, Cedric explains that he is also present because he received an invitation from Prince Cardis, admitting he had not planned on attending otherwise. He then turns his attention to Alexandra, taking her hands and saying he came to see her now that she is attending with Harold. His expression twists as he reveals his true intent, to interfere with their relationship, ruin Harold's reputation, and act as a meddlesome, sister-obsessed older brother. Understanding the threat, Harold quickly steps between them, telling Alexandra they should leave and urging Cedric to wait. The brother protests, arguing that this is unacceptable after so long apart. Alexandra, however, turns to him with a cold expression and states that she has no business with him. He is taken aback, pleading with her and reminding her that he is the next head of the Chevalier family. Unmoved, Alexandra holds onto Harold's arm and asks if her brother has any request for her. She makes her wish clear, for him to leave them alone immediately. She firmly states that as the eldest daughter of the Chevalier house, her engagement to the third prince, Harold, is a settled matter. Her brother becomes frantic, shouting that their very existence as a couple will inevitably have an influence, however small, on the struggle for the royal succession. He explained his reasoning. Harold listened, realizing that Cedric's actions were a calculated move to gain influence within the royal palace, leveraging the power of the Chevalier house for the sake of its next head. Cedric declared that he was already 3 steps ahead. The prince was taken aback, questioning the timing of this revelation and wondering if his brothers were involved. His suspicion was confirmed as Prince Raphael appeared, a smug grin on his face. Raphael explained that with the royal family and the Chevaliers now connected, he had been asked to add some excitement to the proceedings. He stood before Harold and Alexandra, arms crossed with a confident laugh. Harold insisted he had no desire to be part of the succession struggle, but Cedric cheerfully offered his assistance, claiming he would do anything for his dear sister's sake. Alexandra, however, cut him off, her expression firm. She declared that was quite enough and turned to Harold, asking if he was ready to leave. Her brother's smile vanished. He considered the situation, believing that to survive in the world of Inhaza, one needed the power of the Chevalier house. The most logical strategy, he concluded, was to make an ally of him. Despite this, Harold bowed his head slightly toward Alexandra, admitting that he, too, wished to borrow Cedric's power. He reasoned internally that a simple bow was a small price to pay for the Chevalier house's backing. a move that could help him and Alexandra avoid a disastrous fate. His former pride, he realized, was long gone. Cedric accepted the proposal. Understood, he said, agreeing to lend his strength. He then added a crucial caveat. There was a condition. The prince looked up, surprised by the stipulation. With a sudden shift in tone, Cedric apologized for his bluntness before stating that Prince Harold was known throughout the world as the incompetent, wicked prince, a reputation he claimed was Harold's own doing. Alexandra reacted with fury, demanding to know why her brother was insulting him, while Raphael watched with amusement. Harold was stunned, realizing Cedric was implying he needed to atone for the damage to Alexandra's name. Cedric then pointed, laying out his condition plainly. He explained that within the world of Inhaza, there exists a dual event. To win his approval for the relationship with Alexandra, Harold must first defeat him in combat. He stood there, a bead of sweat forming on his temple as he processed the challenge. In his mind, Cedric was an event boss, a formidable obstacle. He knew his own capabilities were hardly superior to those of the heroines, a fact that filled him with doubt. Could he, in his current state, truly defeat Cedric? As this question echoed in his thoughts, a voice called out his name, Haru-sama. Alexandra stands defiantly, declaring that she has no need for a partner like her brother. With a determined glint in her eye, she insists that if the Chevalier family requires support, she will be the one to provide it all. Her words are interrupted by the arrival of her brother, Cedric, who smirks as he announces that he is the next head of the family. Hearing this, Harold lowers his head and quietly concedes, much to Alexandra's surprise. He steps forward, directly challenging Harold. Cedric questions if Harold intends to prove he is a man worthy of Alexandra. As she calls out Harold's name in alarm, Cedric demands that he demonstrate his worth by crossing swords with him. The challenger then lays out his terms. Acknowledging that preparations will be necessary, Cedric proposes they hold the duel in 1 month's time at the Chevalier family's townhouse. With a confident bow, he states that he will be looking forward to their confrontation. Alexandra, aghast at the turn of events, calls out to both her brother and Harold, her voice filled with panic. As Cedric departs, Alexandra turns to Harold, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She tells him frankly that in his current state, it is almost impossible for him to achieve victory against her brother. She questions why he accepted the challenge at all, wondering why he didn't simply dismiss her brother's taunts. Harold looks at her intently, replying that he could not simply let it go. He explains that he cannot back down now. To avoid a bad ending, he must become the protagonist's substitute and marry Alexandra. They stand together, their hands clasped. His mind flashes to a vision of a brighter future, one where he and a crowned Alexandra are laughing together. He is determined to break through this terrible fate and see what lies beyond, with her by his side. Returning to the present, Harold walks away with Alexandra. She looks at him with a mixture of concern and exasperation, remarking that he is truly foolish. He simply replies, I know. In a training yard, Harold lies completely spent on the dirt ground, Kasparig perched calmly on his chest. He exhales, murmuring his thanks and admitting he is finished for the day. Watching from the side, Alexandra and Monica rest their chins on their hands with concerned expressions. Alexandra turns to her companion, asking for her opinion on the situation. They move to kneel beside him. Monica states her belief that at this point, no further growth can be expected from him. Alexandra agrees, remarking that they have both been merciless in his training. His trainer's assessment sparks a realization in Harold. He sits up, understanding that his physical abilities have reached their maximum potential. Seeing this, Alexandra suggests that it would be better to switch their focus to specialized technical training. As this unfolds, Kasparig sits alone, his gaze fixed on a butterfly. He thinks to himself that, with this development, they can finally proceed to the next step. Getting to his feet with a renewed sense of purpose, Harold holds a practice sword and addresses the two women. He announces that he has a proposal for his future training, clarifying that it is more of a request. Intrigued, Alexandra asks him to elaborate. Harold explains that for his future sparring sessions, he will need Kasparig to be his partner. He turns his full attention to the cat, his expression hopeful. Hey Cass, he asks, will you join me for some special training? The cat responds with pure delight, leaping onto Harold's shoulder and rubbing affectionately against his cheek. Of course, Kasparig declares, I'm your partner, Hal. In the castle battlements, Alexandra smiles, giving her approval. She agrees to the plan, noting that it's a good idea as it will also help him get used to handling his shield. She appears flustered by the arrangement, but Harold, now dressed in his formal attire, confidently reassures her. He promises that he will be the one to make her strong, so she has nothing to worry about. Her cheeks flush, but she accepts his offer with a determined yes. Nearby, Monica holds Kasparig and reminds Harold with a sly smile that he must absolutely be there for training again tomorrow. He cheerfully agrees, waving goodbye and saying they'll see her tomorrow. As he and Monica turn to leave, he suggests they head back to their rooms. But as they begin to walk, he abruptly halts. His eyes widen, a look of shock spreading across his face. His path is blocked by the fourth prince, Wilfred, accompanied by the maid Marion Seiler. With a neutral expression, Wilfred addresses him as Brother Harold. As Harold and Marion prepare to depart, Prince Wilfred approaches with a condescending smile. He asks if his sister-in-law is already leaving, but Harold cuts him off, stating coldly that it is none of his concern. He continues, announcing that he has been officially recognized as their brother Cardus's right-hand man. Harold, with Kasparig perched on his head, glances back, his expression unreadable. He responds with a flat sigh, remarking that while that's good for Wilfred, he has absolutely no interest in the matter. Wilfred's eye twitches, his composure momentarily broken by the dismissal. He presses on, revealing that he heard Cardis himself boasting about the appointment. He then pointedly asks if Cardis ever considered Harold for the role. A memory surfaces of Cardis, declaring he never once thought of a certain person as his right hand. The insinuation makes Harold and Marion visibly annoyed. He then turns to Marion with a reassuring smile, telling her not to worry. With a flourish, he declares that from now on, he will unite the factions and elevate Prince Cardis to new heights. Marion watches him, her own smile laced with skepticism. Harold interrupts Wilfred's speech with a simple, devastating statement. He is leaving their older brother's faction. The declaration leaves Wilfred utterly stunned. He challenges Wilfred's shock, asking if he truly believes such a thing wouldn't be permitted. Pointing a finger, Harold questions what right Wilfred has to object if their brother himself agrees to it. In response, Wilfred simply laughs, finding the entire situation absurd. Wilfred stands silently for a moment, processing Harold's words and actions as he stands by the gate with Mary. Harold reflects internally on the situation. He realizes that Wilfred's actions, combined with the recent events concerning Sandra, mirror the behavior of the Harold from his previous life, who had also switched allegiances. He turns to the departing Wilfred and speaks again. He reminds his brother that, as the newly appointed right-hand man to Cardis, it would set a terrible example for the others if the third prince were allowed to act in such a way. Wilfred walks away, leaving the tension unresolved. He explained his reasoning to his brother, stating that as the infamous incompetent, evil prince, he had no one to be compared against, making it impossible to establish his own standing. With a confident smirk, he told Wilfred to stop acting as if he were being dragged down, questioning why he would show such concern now. With that, he turned to leave, announcing that he would be on his way. Behind him, Wilfred and Marion could only watch, Wilfred's expression one of utter shock and distress. As they walked away, Marion calmly asked if she should kill Wilfred. Harold, startled, quickly told her to calm down, while Kasparig hissed in agitation on his shoulder. From that day forward, a new training regimen began. Harold found himself sparring with a powerful young woman, whose forceful blow sent him staggering back against a stone battlement as Marion watched from a distance. The knight pressed her advantage, lunging with her massive sword. Harold barely managed to block the strike, his eyes wide with shock at her sheer power. The intense training left him exhausted, slumped against a wall outside the castle grounds. Kasparig rushed to his side, calling out his name in concern. His opponent approached, sword in hand, and asked if he was finished. Wiping a trickle of blood from his lip, Harold gritted his teeth, declaring that he wasn't done yet as he forced himself to stand. She met his defiance with a confident smile, vowing that if he wouldn't come to her, she would certainly defeat him and show him true strength. Sometime later, a carriage rumbled along a road, carrying its passengers away from the familiar city. The carriage brought them to a new city. Harold sat overlooking the sprawling vista, trembling with excitement. Kasparig remarked that it looked fun, and Harold, a wide smile on his face, readily agreed. 1 month after the party where the duel with Cedric was decided, Marion Seiler speaks with a flustered Harold de Hovels. She reassures him, explaining that she has been training Alexandra for the past month and that the only reason he was able to defend against her attacks was due to this training. She tells him not to worry so much. She continues with a playful pout, remarking on how he's supporting his cute subordinate. Harold, however, feels no real sense of trust. He reflects on the past month, a hellish period of training where he ultimately failed to defend against 4 of Alexandra's attacks. His unease is palpable as he mutters that he understands. Seizing the moment, Marion leans in close, winking as she promises to prepare a special reward for him when he defeats Cedric. Her teasing only makes Harold more flustered. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Alexandra Chevalier, who calls out to Hal. Dressed in an elegant gown, she greets them with a warm smile, saying she has been waiting. She then gracefully gestures for them to follow her. She leads them through a grand doorway, welcoming them inside. As Harold steps through, Kasparig perks up on his head. Waiting for them beyond the threshold is Wilfred Welly de Hovels, who greets Harold with a pleasant smile, stating he's been expecting him. He extends a hand, formally welcoming Harold and expressing his anticipation for their business. Harold is taken aback by the gesture, his own hand glowing faintly as he hesitates. He thinks Wilfred is standing far too close, but awkwardly accepts the handshake. Watching the exchange, Alexandra interjects with a stern expression, pointing out that Halsama has only just arrived. Wilfred turns to her with a smile, casually agreeing with her observation as if it were of little consequence. A short while later, the group is seated together. As Marion serves refreshments and Alexandra pets Kasparig, Wilfred snaps his fingers with a sudden realization. He points out that they have yet to decide on the conditions for the upcoming match. He then turns his attention directly to a visibly distressed Alexandra. With a confident air, he declares that this match is a fitting event for her, causing her to flinch. Wilfred elaborates, explaining that the match is a means to determine if Harold is a suitable partner for Alexandra. He looks directly at Harold, stating that to prove it, he wants Harold to demonstrate his resolve and his feelings toward her. He listened as Wilfred calmly laid out his terms for the match. If Wilfred were to win, he would not only bless the engagement between Harold and Alexandra, but also, as the future head of the Chevalier family, promise his full and unwavering support. Harold, flanked by a concerned Alexandra and a surprised Marian, then asked for the other side of the bargain. He declared his own condition with unwavering intensity. If he were to win, Wilfred must personally petition the king to annul his own engagement to Alexandra. Before Wilfred could respond, Alexandra sprang to her feet, shouting for them to wait. She insisted on taking Harold's place in the match, arguing that even if his victory was assured, she could not accept a condition that would so deeply dishonor her brother. Her outburst left Wilfred flustered, who protested that her intervention would render the entire arrangement meaningless. Harold gently placed a hand on Alexandra's shoulder, halting her protest. He calmly reassured her that he understood the situation and that it was all right. Turning to face him, Alexandra looked up, seeking confirmation if he was truly certain about his decision. Kneeling before Alexandra, Harold de Hovels takes her hand. With a confident smile, he addresses her as Xandra, explaining that he has endured a month of grueling special training precisely for this moment. He declares that because of his preparation, no matter the conditions of their contest, he will absolutely not lose. Alexandra looks back at him, a gentle and slightly surprised smile gracing her lips. His outward confidence masks a deeper truth. He admits to himself that he wants to run away, but he cannot. He is Harold Welly de Hovels, known as the cheating dog, the weakest of them all. His thoughts turn to his opponent, Cedric Chevalier, who stands ready with a curved blade. Harold knows that against an adversary as strong as Cedric, who is on par with the heroine, he stands no chance of winning a fair fight. Cedric, however, seems to have made his decision. He acknowledges that while this is the only way, it is fine. With a serene smile, he accepts the challenge, stating, "Let's begin." The two now face each other in a courtyard. Cedric states that he has already explained the circumstances, but now wishes to know the extent of Harold's resolve and thoughts on the matter. As his opponent draws his weapon, Harold's eyes narrow in recognition. He identifies the distinct blade as Cedric's personal weapon, the Kurenai Bayaka, the Crimson White Flower. The sword is known to possess top-class attack power and a curse effect. Furthermore, its unique skill, Kurenai Ranbu, the Crimson Wild Dance, is a masterful technique that unleashes 5 consecutive strikes in a single, fluid motion. The truth of the situation dawns on Harold. Cedric isn't merely trying to win. He fully intends to kill him. A single misstep would be fatal. Yet, despite this grim realization, a smirk plays on his lips as he understands this was Cedric's plan all along. He calls out to Kasparig, who materializes on his shoulder. Harold asks the cat to fight alongside him, and Kasparig readily agrees, declaring himself Hal's partner. With his companion at his side, Harold crouches, dark energy swirling around him as he prepares for the deadly duel. He faced his opponent, Cedric, who looked at him with disbelief. Cedric questioned if Harold truly intended to fight him, addressing him formally as Your Highness. Cedric's expression hardened as he gripped the hilt of his sword. He stated that since Harold had made the decision, he would offer a warning. He would not be holding back. He replied that it was fine by him. Clutching Kasparig's weapon form, Harold declared that he and his partner would seize victory together. With the combatants ready, Marian Seiler announced the condition of the duel. The winner would have their engagement to Alexandra formally recognized. With a sharp gesture, she cried out for the match to begin. The moment the word was given, Cedric lunged forward with blinding speed. Harold's eyes widened in shock as he realized his opponent was using some form of physical enhancement. The prince barely managed to raise his weapon in time to parry the swift, downward slash. The force of the blow was palpable, but his defense held. He smirked, feeling the power granted by Kasparig. He thought to himself that with this overwhelming advantage in both speed and might, victory was assured. As he blocked another strike, he told Cedric it wouldn't be so easy to defeat him. In response, Cedric unleashed his signature technique, Kurenai Ranbu. A furious barrage of slashes descended upon Harold, the attacks never ceasing. Cedric taunted him through the assault, asking what was wrong as Harold struggled to defend against the relentless storm of steel. Cedric Chevalier laughs maniacally, pressing his attack against Harold de Hovels. With a shower of sparks, Harold strains to block the heavy blow, gritting his teeth as Cedric taunts him, asking what's wrong. He leaps back to create distance, surprised by the force of the assault. Cedric stands poised, admitting to himself that he hadn't expected Lord Harold to be this capable. From his shoulder, Kasparig urgently tells Hal that now is his chance. The cat insists he should use his snatch ability to finish it in one go. He flatly refuses. Harold declares that he will not use snatch in this contest. The ability in question, snatch, is a powerful one, a long-range attack with an instant death effect that can be used even while defending. And that is precisely why he won't use it. He is determined to achieve a complete and total victory over Cedric without relying on such technique. His eyes narrow with resolve. He has trained specifically for this moment, and he vows to see it through. From the sidelines, Alexandra and Marian watch with concern, murmuring his name. In response, Cedric begins to gather his own power, his sword glowing with immense energy. A confident, cruel smirk spreads across his face as he prepares to unleash his ultimate technique. He lunges forward, unleashing a massive wave of crimson energy, the Crimson Lotus Double Severance. Harold braces himself, his own weapon flaring with dark power to meet the devastating attack head-on. He braced himself for the incoming assault. From a distance, Kasparig watched, musing to himself that it was a shame, but playing along with his partner's whims was part of Harold's role. Sensing the thought, Harold internally cursed the creature, calling it a bad cat. With his sword held firm, he stared down his opponent, his eyes burning with defiance. He roared a challenge for Cedric to come on, vowing that he would block the attack. The two blades met with a deafening crash. A shockwave erupted from the point of impact as Harold's sword held fast against the crimson energy of Cedric's technique. Stunned that his attack was stopped, Cedric could only grit his teeth and call him a fool. Before Cedric could react, Harold drove his free fist directly into his face. The force of the unexpected blow sent Cedric flying backward, tumbling through the air. The sudden exertion left Harold panting, sweat beading on his brow as he caught his breath. With a wild, triumphant grin, Harold de Hovels stands over the kneeling form of Cedric Chevalier, declaring their contest won. The victory is absolute. His triumphant mood vanishes in an instant, replaced by a look of mild distress as Kasparig, perched atop his head, seems to deliver a report. Meanwhile, Cedric stands with his arms crossed, confidently stating that his talents lie more in domestic affairs than in martial arts, and that the outcome of their duel should be accepted as a true measure of his abilities. Nearby, Alexandra scolds a frustrated Wilfred, telling him his behavior is unsightly and that he should simply acknowledge Harold's strength. He finally concedes, rubbing his eye in resignation. He admits defeat, lamenting that he is too soft on his sister. Harold, however, smiles knowingly, his thoughts on Cedric's other ability, the Enhancer. Cedric continues, telling Harold that while it's a shame, his final blow was a light one that wouldn't work on a real battlefield. He insists that Harold should have brought a weapon, but Harold calmly retorts that it wasn't necessary. His opponent presses, asking if Harold is looking down on him for not using a sword, bow, or even magic. Harold simply states that he is mistaken. He explains with a confident smile, flanked by Marion and Alexandra. His sword is Alexandra, his bow is Monica, and his magic is Kasparig. He doesn't need those skills himself because he has them all by his side. As long as he has his shield, he can protect them. Cedric listens, a faint, understanding smile gracing his lips as he processes this revelation. Harold's resolve is clear in his mind. He will protect them. That is the very reason he chose to be the shield. Breaking the silence, Cedric formally addresses him. Lord Harold. In response, Harold and his companions turn, and he answers simply yes. He bows deeply before Harold, a gesture of profound respect. With his head lowered, Cedric makes a solemn request. Please, take care of my sister, Alexandra. Harold looks on, taken aback by the sudden plea. He meets the request with unwavering resolve. Clenching his fist, Harold declares, yes, I will absolutely make Sandra happy. He is immediately enveloped in a tight embrace by an ecstatic Alexandra, who exclaims her delight at their future together. Marion joins in, her expression warm, as Harold is caught, flustered, between the two women. Several days after the duel, within the walls of the academy, Wilfred sits at his desk, sighing with a weary expression. He reflects on the recent turn of events, specifically Alexandra's engagement to the notoriously incompetent prince. Wilfred recalls his own shock upon learning the news, admitting that he was so stunned he couldn't even protest the contract with the royal family. He reasons that Alexandra's only viable marriage partner would be from the royal family, but he can't shake the feeling that Prince Harold is the wrong choice. Wilfred believes that his own family, the Chevalier house, was pressured into the engagement and had no choice but to accept. He confronts Harold directly, voicing his perception of the prince's character. Wilfred states that everyone in the country knows of the incompetent, infamous prince, a man who is arrogant and haughty towards his superiors, yet fawns over those he deems beneath him. He smiles, a knowing look on his face, and concludes that the entire duel was a fabrication. However, Wilfred concedes that, through the charade, Harold did manage to demonstrate his resolve as Alexandra's fiancé. Cedric Chevalier stands alone, a faint, resigned smile on his face. He acknowledges to himself that he was defeated by Prince Harold. He resolves to accept this outcome and to offer his congratulations to Alexandra on her engagement. His composure shatters in an instant. Slamming his fist down, he seethes, realizing he could never truly offer them his blessing. An image of a happy Harold and Alexandra flashes in his mind, and he vows to watch over his little sister from now on. If he finds Alexandra even slightly unsuitable, he will take everything from them both. Meanwhile, during a meal, Alexandra leans close to Harold, offering to feed him. Flustered by her proximity, Harold agrees. Nearby, Monica observes them, thinking that while it's fine to be close, Prince Harold seems a bit troubled. She then offers to assist with the meal, stating it is her duty. Before Monica can act, Alexandra insists that as his fiancée, it is her role to feed him. The two women glare at each other over a bewildered Harold, who just wants to eat. Their standoff is interrupted by a nervous maid who apologizes for intruding. She announces that Prince Cardis has summoned Prince Harold. Harold considers the summons, wondering if Cardis intends to form a faction or say something foolish. He dismisses the thought and calmly tells the maid he understands and will go at once. As he prepares to leave, Alexandra declares that if he is meeting with Prince Cardis, she must accompany him as his fiancée. She suspects Cardis has some purpose involving the Chevalier family as well. He looks at her with a gentle expression, realizing she wants to be with him so he won't be unfairly blamed for anything. He thinks to himself what a truly kind fiancée she is. The realization overwhelms him with emotion, and he covers his face. Alexandra, concerned, asks what is wrong, but he quickly waves it off, insisting it's nothing. Later, Harold enters an office where Prince Cardis sits waiting, his hands clasped and his expression grim. Harold announces his departure, though the meaning is unclear. Cardis looks up sharply. He addresses Harold directly, stating that he trusts Harold understands why he has been summoned. Behind Harold, Alexandra stands silently, her expression just as serious. He angrily confronts Harold, questioning how someone separated from their faction and supposedly powerless could even think of vying for the throne against him. Pointing an accusatory finger, he reminds Harold that they are both sons of the same mother, making him the third prince, and demands to know why Harold is betraying him now. Harold calmly turns the question back on him. He presses further, asking why Cardis would ask him to join his faction, despite any request from the king, when it's obvious that Cardis despises him more than anyone else. Harold then asks directly if his brother was even aware of his own deep-seated animosity. The question renders Cardis speechless, his eyes wide with surprise. Sensing a misunderstanding, he quickly clarifies with an almost manic energy that it's not what Cardis thinks. He declares he has no intention of siding with their other brother, Wilfred, and would never lend him a hand. As Cardis stammers for him to wait, Harold turns his back, deciding the conversation is over. He tells Alexandra they are leaving, and she agrees. Cardis can only shout in frustration as they walk away. Their departure is cut short by a cheerful voice. The second prince, Raphael, appears before them with a bright smile, announcing that he's been waiting for Harold, whose face registers pure surprise. A cheerful voice calls out, "Raphael." Harold and Alexandra turn to see the second prince approaching. Raphael explains that he heard Harold had been summoned due to his impressive swordsmanship and came to see what was happening. He continues with a bright smile, clarifying that he heard about it from a maid, gesturing towards a shocked Monica. He then innocently asks Harold what business he has with his older brother. The implication dawns on Harold, his eyes widening in shock. He now understands the situation he's been drawn into, with a furious Cardis looming in the background. His brother's face twists with rage. Cardis points accusingly at Harold, demanding to know if he intends to betray his own flesh and blood to join forces with Raphael. He looks down, a shadow crossing his face as he quietly confirms, "That's right." Raphael watches the exchange with a gentle, knowing smile. He turns to Alexandra, sighing with exhaustion. "Betrayal? Let's go, Sandra. I can't deal with this any longer." She calmly agrees. As they turn to leave, Cardis erupts, pointing after them. "If that's your intention, then I have my own plans. Don't think this is over." Raphael ignores the outburst, stepping cheerfully in front of Harold. He suggests that, just as his brother said, Harold should join forces with him. Leaning closer, he playfully asks if Harold dislikes him. He winks, offering a reassuring smile. "At the very least, you don't hate me," he says, then adds, "more than you hate Cardis, right?" His cheerful demeanor shifts to one of quiet intensity. "You know that my mother, like my brother Cardis, is Her Highness Margaret, don't you?" he asks. Harold flinches, stunned by the revelation, as Raphael presses on. "So why are you asking me this, Harold?" Harold froze, a sudden panic seizing him. He had made a slip. His knowledge of Raphael's background came purely from the world's underlying settings. Raphael, with a knowing look, pointed out that Harold shouldn't have said that. He quickly tried to cover his mistake, explaining that he'd noticed how poorly their mother, the queen, was treated by those around her. He reasoned that he simply thought Raphael and Cardis were taking advantage of that fact. Raphael smiled, remarking that Harold was quite observant. Raphael casually dismissed the topic. He then pointed out that if Harold himself had no intention of getting involved, then there was no real need for them to be adversaries. He pressed the point, suggesting that now that Harold understood their situation, there was no longer a need for him to be so guarded. Harold hesitated, conceding that it might be true, but remained uncertain. Harold's thoughts, however, returned to the source of the entire conflict. He recalled that the incident was instigated by Cardis drawing Wilfred into his schemes, a fact underscored by Cardis's own words. He clutched his head, frustrated. Cardis had made it clear that if Harold let the matter drop, he would retaliate. The threat left Harold feeling trapped. Sensing his turmoil, Raphael extended his hand, presenting an alternative: join him and gain his protection. Harold considered the offer, but stated that he had a request to make first. Raphael questioned his reasoning, asking if it wouldn't be better for his future to simply accept. With unwavering resolve, Harold confirmed that it was absolutely necessary. His certainty, however, was based on his foreknowledge of events. He knew that, in time, Raphael would undoubtedly become Wilfred's ally, forming a powerful faction. Therefore, he concluded with conviction, getting close to Raphael was not a sound strategy. Harold considers Raphael's true intentions, realizing that the prince's solicitation was also a strategic move to bring the influential Chevalier family into his sphere of influence. He holds Alexandra's hand, his resolve hardening. While avoiding his own grim fate is a priority, he finds the thought of any harm coming to her and her family even more detestable. Alexandra, sensing his intensity, looks up at him with a blush and a hint of confusion. His attention returns to the conversation at hand. Harold clarifies to Raphael that he isn't simply being reserved. Raphael's smile doesn't waver as he presses the point, asking if this is a refusal and pointedly questioning whether Harold intends to aim for the throne himself. He bows his head slightly, making his position unequivocally clear. He declares that he has no intention of involving himself in the struggle for the throne, nor will he offer his cooperation to any faction. Raphael raises his hands in a gesture of concession, his smile unwavering. He accepts Harold's firm stance, stating that if he is that resolute, then there is nothing more to be done, and he will abandon his proposal for the time being. He then adds a surprising offer, urging Harold to seek him out if he ever finds himself in trouble, reminding him that they are brothers. The unexpected sentiment catches Harold completely off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless with his fists clenched in surprise. Elsewhere, Alexandra's face is flushed with emotion. She clutches her hands to her chest, thinking to herself that for Harold's sake, she can endure anything. Her resolve translates into action. Following the duel with Cedric, Harold's training regimen was intensified fivefold for an entire month. He lies exhausted on the floor as Alexandra sits on his back to add to the challenge, while Caspar Rieg prods his head, cheering him on. Harold can only groan that the overwork will be the death of him. To continue leveling up, Harold persists in his special training, wielding the jet-black scythe Caspar Rieg. The weapon, now manifesting as a massive claw, has grown significantly in power. He deftly evades its sweeping attacks as Caspar Rieg, in its small cat form, watches with amusement. After the session, Alexandra approaches him, her cheeks flushed. She expresses her sincere gratitude for how strong he has become. He seems flustered by her forwardness as she playfully pokes his cheek, thinking she's being a bit too familiar. Their moment is interrupted by Monica's arrival. She announces that she bears an order from His Majesty the King. They are to come for an audience immediately. Surprised, Harold asks what the matter is. She considers his question with a worried expression, speculating that the summons is likely not related to Prince Cardis. The thought does little to ease Harold's troubled look. Deciding to face the matter, he quickly tells the others he will go to the king's location and urges them to wait, before rushing off toward the audience chamber. In the throne room, King de Hovels sits upon his throne and begins to explain the reason he has summoned them. He reveals the significant news to the four assembled princes, Raphael, Wilfred, Harold, and Cardis. A legation from the Valtion Holy Kingdom is being dispatched to their nation. The announcement catches Harold completely off guard. He had been expecting a lecture, but this development was entirely different. His mind races, pondering the implications of a visit from the Valtion Holy Kingdom. The Valtion Holy Kingdom is the seat of the church that governs this world's faith. It is the main stage of the story he knows, and from it, the heroine is set to appear at the Royal Academy as an exchange student, Saint Christia, accompanied by her follower, the Holy Knight Cawardelmio. Christia is the very picture of a saint, a heroine filled with selfless devotion and love. Surrounded by gentle creatures in a peaceful field, this marks her first appearance in this new reality. As Harold contemplated the arrival of the game's heroine, another character came to mind. Carla, the so-called Kutsukuro heroine, a woman whose most memorable moments involved being captured and defiantly shouting, "Kill me," at her captors. While such grim recollections occupied his thoughts, the proceedings in the throne room continued. Cardis stepped forward, asking his father if they had been summoned to serve as the legation's escort. Harold, meanwhile, tried to focus, knowing this was no time for distractions. The king acknowledged the directness of the question. He explained that while he would normally ask either Cardis or Raphael, the purpose of this particular visit was solely to foster goodwill. Therefore, he announced with a confident smile, he would entrust the duty of escorting the legation to Wilfred. The decision left Cardis stunned. He immediately protested, pointing out that Wilfred was only 13 and had never before performed such a duty for the royal family. Harold, meanwhile, felt a wave of relief, believing this meant he was uninvolved. The queen voiced her agreement with Cardis, arguing that the responsibility was too great. But the king was firm, declaring that it was precisely because of the weight of the duty that it was time for Wilfred to begin fulfilling his obligations as a prince. He then turned to his eldest son, instructing Cardis to provide assistance to Wilfred, as he would be there with him. Cardis could only bow his head in acceptance. The king stroked his chin, musing that perhaps the Ibel king had foreseen this development and deliberately placed Wilfred within Cardis's faction. From his seat, Harold watched his father's calculations with a grim expression. Just then, Raphael spoke up, addressing the king. He proposed that if the goal was to give Wilfred experience, it would be best to have Harold, who was the same age, join him. The two of them, he suggested, could be assigned the escort duty together. The suggestion struck Harold with silent, wide-eyed horror. His composure shattered completely. "Please wait," he cried out, hands raised in frantic protest. He insisted that such a great responsibility was not a role for him, and that he absolutely refused. The king simply watched him, a thoughtful expression on his face. He reels internally as his father, King de Hovels, declares that Raphael's suggestion was the most sensible. The king tells Harold not to overthink it, adding that Raphael need not elaborate further, which only deepens the second prince's smug satisfaction. With the matter settled, the king formally announces that the duty of escorting the Valtion Holy Kingdom's legation will be carried out jointly by Harold and Wilfred. The younger prince, Wilfred, stands with a stern and determined expression, while Harold's face is a mask of utter defeat. Sometime later, in a quiet room, a long, drawn-out sigh of despair echoes faintly. The source of the sigh is Harold, now seated with Alexandra and her maid, Marian. Noticing his gloom, Alexandra asks what has happened. Marian calmly explains the new arrangement. Harold will join Prince Wilfred as an escort, with Prince Cardus acting as a reserve. The news clearly surprises Alexandra. His mind races with the disastrous implications. He realizes that his direct involvement could jeopardize Alexandra's engagement and brand him as a scheming opportunist. He voices his anxieties aloud, explaining that he is now tasked with escorting the saint and that he absolutely cannot handle the responsibility alone. As he speaks, Alexandra observes him, seemingly comparing him to Wilfred, and gently asks him to stop belittling himself. His panic escalates as he clasps his hands, pleading that having to face both the saint and Alexandra at the same time is an impossible, nightmarish scenario. Seeing his genuine distress, Alexandra covers her mouth to stifle a giggle. Despite his flustered state, Harold nervously accepts the duty. His reluctant resolve amuses Alexandra, who turns to Marian with a confident smile. She declares that they will use this opportunity to show the entire kingdom which of the two princes is truly superior. Within the palace, two officials discuss the ongoing preparations to welcome an arriving envoy. One notes that while things are proceeding, the actual work is being handled entirely by the foreign affairs ministers. Nearby, Prince Harold listens with a frown, tapping his finger on his chin. He thinks to himself that leaving such matters entirely to others could become a problem. This will not do. In another part of the room, Prince Cardus slams his hands on a desk, enraged. He shouts that their kingdom is being made a fool of by these country bumpkins. His outburst catches Harold's attention. As an official continues to sort through papers, Harold resolves to lend a hand himself. He approaches the slick-haired official, who turns in surprise. Harold states that this kind of work is better handled with more people and offers to lend half of his own men to the task. The official stares, aghast, unable to believe the prince's offer. The official, deeply moved, thanks him profusely. Harold simply tells him to leave it to him, his expression resolute. A look of profound relief washes over the official's face. Sometime later, Prince Raphael cheerfully greets Harold, asking how the preparations are progressing. Harold, visibly annoyed, replies that the servants and ministers are the ones doing the work, not him. Raphael counters that Harold is acting like a servant himself by directing them. He then points to their brother, Wilfred, who is giving orders to Marian, noting that Wilfred's approach is different. He continues, explaining that if someone of his station were to interfere, it would only create confusion. He claims he is merely being considerate by staying out of the way. Harold appears flustered by his brother's logic. Ignoring the comment, Harold turns back to the officials. He informs them that regarding the envoy's stay, he has already coordinated everything with Minister Olsen and the civil servants. With a confident smirk, he assures them it is all taken care of. Elsewhere, the wigged official speaks privately with Cedric Chevalier. The official expresses his gratitude, saying that thanks to Lord Cedric's help, everything is proceeding smoothly. Cedric raises a finger to his lips, a pleasant but unreadable smile on his face. He approached Harold with a knowing smile, remarking how well-liked the young prince seemed to be by the members of the Chevalier household. Harold, standing beside him, offered a non-committal glance in return. From behind a nearby pillar, Alexandra Chevalier peeked out, her expression flustered as she realized she had been spotted. Ignoring the interruption, Cedric continued his pitch, insisting that Harold should join forces with him. He promised that together, they could make much greater use of Harold's talents. He responded with a strained smile, scratching the back of his head as he reminded Cedric that he had already refused the offer. Undeterred, Cedric leaned in close, his voice dropping to a near whisper as he stated plainly, "I want you." The intense moment was broken by an attendant calling for Prince Harold's attention. Harold raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, looking relieved for the excuse to step away. In the background, Alexandra watched with her arms crossed, her expression one of clear annoyance. As he departed, Cedric called after him, urging him to seriously consider the proposal. He then watched Harold leave, a confident, calculating smile playing on his lips. Sometime later, Harold stood with his brothers as an official reported that the envoy from the Valtion Holy Kingdom had entered the capital and would soon arrive at the palace. Harold's expression was grim, anticipating the meeting. His brother Wilfred turned to him with a brilliant smile, pointing out that the Pope himself was leading the delegation. He declared that, regardless of their past issues, they should all cooperate to ensure the reception was a success. To punctuate his words, Wilfred suddenly seized Harold's gloved hand, startling him. Holding his brother's hand firmly, he proposed they all combine their strength to give him, Wilfred, a grand welcome. Raphael smirked at the display, while Cardus looked away in disgust. Just then, the grand procession of knights on horseback began to arrive, greeted by the roar of the crowd. He stood with his brothers before a grand carriage as an attendant's voice cut through the air, announcing the arrival of the envoy from the Valtion Holy Kingdom. Stepping forward with a practiced smile, he addressed the carriage's unseen occupant. He welcomed His Holiness the Pope to the de Havil's kingdom and introduced himself as the fourth prince, Wilfred, offering to serve as their escort. As Harold watched, a flicker of confusion crossed his face. He wondered why no one was disembarking. After a moment's hesitation, He offered a slight bow and introduced himself as well, stating he was the third prince, Harold. At the door of a carriage, Holy Knight Cara del Mio blocks the path of Prince Wilfred, her expression stern. She instructs him not to approach. Outraged, Wilfred shouts at her, calling her actions insolent. Observing the confrontation, Prince Harold muses to himself that this behavior is typical of Carla. He reasons that as a holy knight, she is merely fulfilling her duty to protect, regardless of whether she is facing royalty or a common criminal. He continues his internal assessment, confident that Carla's pride and knightly spirit would never allow her to betray them. A small, satisfied smile plays on his lips as Cowardel stands her ground. A voice calls out from inside the carriage. It is Saint Christia, who gently chides Carla for her rudeness. She then addresses both Prince Harold and Prince Wilfred, telling them to apologize at once. As she emerges, Harold recognizes her instantly. Christia Salino. He recalls that in the world of Tenbaza, she was the heroine with the worst personality, yet also the sole possessor of recovery and status-curing skills, making her the strongest supporter. Christia looks at her knight with displeasure, asking if she didn't hear her command. She declares that she will not permit any disrespect towards the princes of the De Havel's kingdom. Cowardel remains silent, her gaze lowered. In response to the public reprimand, the Holy Knight bows her head slightly and offers a quiet apology. Harold observes the exchange with a knowing smirk. He realizes Christia's attitude isn't born from a lack of tact, but is a calculated display. She deliberately scolded her knight in front of them, confirming his belief that her personality is indeed quite wicked. Having established her authority, Christia turns to Wilfred with a charming smile and offers him her hand. Completely won over, Wilfred accepts it graciously. Harold concludes that Christia's personality is as devious as the original story suggested, and that her scolding of Cowardel was a test for him and Wilfred. His thoughts are interrupted when Christia turns to him directly, asking about the Pope. Caught off guard, Harold can only stammer an apology. She stands beside a young man who explains that with the Pope's health failing, he and Christia have come as representatives of the Salvatore family. He introduces himself as Lorenzo II Salvatore. The name strikes Harold with shocking familiarity. Lorenzo, the name echoes in his mind, dredging up knowledge from his past life. Lorenzo is the mastermind behind the Saintis abduction incident in the Inhaza game, a plot designed to seize control of the Holy Kingdom. He cheerfully offers to guide them all to the king's location. Harold can only stare, a sense of foreboding washing over him as he realizes a major event is about to unfold. As they walk, Marion turns to Harold, her expression soft. She begins to apologize for the earlier incident, but Harold, his mind racing, barely registers her words. He thanks her, claiming to be accustomed to such things, though he internally admits he is completely blind to what lies ahead. His train of thought is shattered when he sees Lorenzo's hand gripping Christia's tightly. Marion notices his reaction and asks if something is wrong, but he quickly plays it off as nothing. The group proceeds into the grand throne room. King de Havels sits upon his throne, welcoming the delegation from afar with open arms. Lorenzo steps forward, bowing slightly. He offers his gratitude for the warm reception, stating that he is overjoyed at the prospect of this visit leading to a stronger, unshakable relationship between the de Havel's kingdom and the Bartion Holy Kingdom. The king smiles, agreeing with the sentiment. He encourages them to make themselves comfortable during their stay. Harold breathes a small sigh of relief, thinking that all that remains is to show the delegation to their quarters, leaving them with free time until the evening's party. Lorenzo turns to Christia with a charming smile, offering to personally guide her to her room. She thanks him graciously, but as he turns away, his smile tightens and he adds a single, ominous word. However, her gaze finds Harold. With a faint blush dusting her cheeks, she makes a request. Since this is a special occasion, she would be delighted if Prince Harold himself would be her escort. Prince Harold de Havels trembles, a cold sweat beading on his brow as Saint Christia clings to his arm with a dazzling smile. This is a terrible situation, he realizes, acutely aware that they are the center of attention. From behind a nearby pillar, Princess Alexandra watches the scene unfold, her expression one of utter shock. Her grip tightens slightly as she looks up at him, her eyes welling with tears. With a soft, pleading voice, she asks if he truly will not escort her. He stammers, unable to refuse such a display. Taking her hand, he forces a smile and declares that it would be an honor. From a short distance, Lorenzo Salvatore observes them with a knowing grin, while Princess Alexandra's distress seems to manifest as a crack upon the very pillar she hides behind. Now walking side by side through the grand hall, their attendants following closely, Christia expresses her admiration for the splendor of the de Havel's royal palace. Harold, still visibly tense, manages a polite thank you. She leans closer, a playful glint in her eye, and asks how Prince Harold typically spends his days here. Before he can answer, she notes that for the past several months, he has been spending every day with his fiancée, diligently attending her elemental magic training sessions. His eyes widen in alarm. He was certain Christia should have no knowledge of such matters. A dreadful premonition washes over him as he sees her subtle, triumphant smile. The feeling is confirmed when Marion Seiler steps forward with a proposal. She suggests that Harold have a practice match with Carla, asserting that it would surely be a beneficial experience for both of them. The prince can only stare in disbelief. Before he can formulate a response, Lorenzo Salvatore smoothly intervenes. He offers to be Harold's opponent, stating that it is a chance to witness the prince's renowned prowess up close. Trapped, Harold grits his teeth in frustration as Christia clasps her hands together, delighted by the turn of events. He sighs in resignation, covering his face with one hand. He agrees to the match, but warns them not to expect too much. Christia's face lights up with joy. She thanks him profusely and declares she will make the arrangements for the very next day. Their procession finally comes to a halt before a set of large double doors. Marion gestures forward, announcing that they have arrived at their destination. Her shock was visible from across the hall. St. Christia leaned close to Prince Harold, a triumphant smirk on her face as she held his chin. She whispered that she would see him later, leaving him trembling with indignation. Later, during the party, Harold escorted Alexandra. She reminded him that as his fiancée, she expected him to have eyes only for her. He quickly agreed, assuring her that he had no intention of looking at any other woman. His promise was immediately put to the test. A movement caught his eye, and he turned to see St. Christia arriving on the arm of Lorenzo Salvatore. The sight confirmed his suspicions. This was all an elaborate setup. He clenched his jaw, unable to look away. Alexandra noticed his fixed gaze, remarking that his attention seemed to be entirely on the saint. She then asked if her Hal was different from the others, prompting a flustered denial from the prince. A sudden realization struck him. He understood now that Alexandra's jealousy was incredibly deep, and it was this very jealousy that had caused her to antagonize the other heroines in the story he remembered. He turned to her abruptly, taking both of her hands in his. With an earnest and desperate expression, he pleaded for her to believe him, to understand the truth of the situation. She blushed, taken aback by his intensity. She stammered that it wasn't that she didn't trust him, but the thought of him turning his attention to other women was something she couldn't bear. She averted her gaze, her face still flushed. "No, I believe you," she whispered, her voice trailing off as she added a quiet but. She confessed that she couldn't suppress her anxiety, despite her trust. Harold acknowledged her feelings, explaining that he simply wanted her to know the truth. As they held hands, a new understanding passing between them, the king watched from his throne, observing the tender moment between his son and the princess. King de Hovels allowed a small, satisfied smile to cross his face before raising his glass and taking a thoughtful sip. His voice rings out across the grand hall, addressing all his guests. He bids them to enjoy the night's festivities. In one corner, St. Christia and Lorenzo Salvatore share a toast, their smiles hinting at a shared purpose. Elsewhere, the princes Cardis and Raphael converse amiably over their own drinks. Amidst the crowd, Harold stands beside Alexandra, a complex intensity in his eyes as he holds his wine, while she looks on with a gentle smile. Nearby, Marion Seiler keeps a watchful, silent vigil. At the gathering, Harold de Hovels is startled when a knight in armor, Cowardel Mio, suddenly bows deeply before him. She apologizes for her previous rude behavior, admitting she had misjudged him. Harold stares, utterly bewildered by the sudden apology. He quickly tells her not to worry about it. Taking the opportunity, she formally introduces herself as Cowardel Mio, the guard assigned to St. Christia. In response, Harold introduces himself as well. Her expression softens into a warm, admiring smile. She thinks to herself that the rumors were true. Prince Harold is indeed an amazing person, far different from what she had imagined. As Harold stammers an excuse to leave, Alexandra steps forward with a gentle smile. She introduces herself as his fiancée, Alexandra Chevalier, and thanks Cowardel for her understanding of how. She then expresses a sincere wish to become friends with Cowardel. The knight seems taken aback, asking if Alexandra is certain. With a bright, reassuring smile, Alexandra confirms that she would be delighted, as long as Cowardel is willing. Cowardel's face lights up with joy. She realizes that Alexandra is just as wonderful a person as Prince Harold. She feels an overwhelming sense of gratitude for having formed a bond with such remarkable people. Nearby, Alexandra reflects on how well things turned out, thinking she might have been worrying for nothing. Her pleasant thought is shattered when St. Christia suddenly appears, clinging intimately to Harold's arm. He yells her name in shock. Alexandra's face falls, her expression turning to one of pure shock. Christia, ignoring Harold's protest to stop, turns to Alexandra and says she wants to be friends with her too. She suggests that this level of closeness is perfectly normal for friends. Before the situation can escalate further, Lorenzo Salvatore smoothly intervenes. Taking Christia's hand, he points out that his brother Harold already has a partner, and graciously offers to dance with her himself. Harold can only watch, stunned by the turn of events. Having been intercepted, Christia turns her gaze back towards Harold, a sly smile playing on her lips. She remarks that if the invitation had come from Prince Wilfred, she would have certainly declined. Harold stands frozen, a bead of sweat trickling down his face. Lorenzo then addresses Harold directly, advising him that there is no need to hold back or show restraint simply because she is the saint. He turns his charming smile upon Christia, asking if her comment was a slight against him. She giggles, replying that if it was, then she is pleased. As Harold stews in silent frustration, Alexandra leans in, quietly telling him it is time for them to go. He looks to Alexandra, acknowledging her consideration but insisting that as her fiancée, he cannot simply let the matter drop. Alexandra looks down, murmuring an apology. Suddenly, a strange sensation overcomes Harold. He clutches his head, trembling, wondering what is happening to him, and if he has somehow become drunk. Alexandra watches him, her expression filled with concern. As Lorenzo and Christia glide across the dance floor, Harold and Alexandra watch from the side. The music concludes, and Harold remarks with a hint of relief that the difficult dance seems to be over. Alexandra turns to him, pointing out that he has never danced before. The simple statement hits Harold with the force of a revelation. He's been tricked. At that exact moment, a small, faintly glowing object falls from his collar. Before he can react, Monica appears, holding out a handkerchief. She calmly states that Lord Harold dropped it. Harold is stunned to see her, his shock deepening as he notices Caspar Rieg with her, wondering why his cat is here. She offers a knowing smile, asking if this sort of situation is something he dislikes, adding that she had assumed he would enjoy it. As Caspar Rieg purrs in her arms, a blushing and flustered Harold internally demands to know why she went so far as to involve his cat in her scheme. Monica, holding Caspar Rieg, addresses a flustered Alexandra. She finds the situation amusing and asks if Alexandra's comment was directed at her. Monica then advises her to set aside her own matters, reminding her that the princess should not be the one dancing. Her cheeks puffed out in frustration, Alexandra retorts that she was just about to invite him to dance when he interfered. The moment returns to Harold, who is visibly distressed. He stammers that he has never danced before and insists that doing so would only bring shame upon Alexandra. Beside him, Monica hides her face, embarrassed by the awkward exchange. In response to his hesitation, Alexandra firmly takes his hand. With a determined look, she declares that she will take the lead. Harold is taken aback by her sudden confidence. He remains flustered, but Alexandra beams with a bright, reassuring smile. Seeing her resolve, Harold blushes, extends his own hand, and formally asks for the dance. Now on the dance floor, Harold holds Alexandra close. He reflects internally that he never saw such a smile from her in the world of Enza. Below, they're seen gliding across the grand ballroom as Monica watches from the sidelines. As they move to the music, he wonders aloud if he is truly managing to dance. Alexandra giggles, reassuring him that he is doing very well. Their dance is suddenly interrupted as another couple bumps into them. Lorenzo Salvatore, dancing with a red-haired woman, turns and apologizes for his clumsiness. Harold is startled by the unexpected collision. Amidst the applause of the other guests, he recovers his composure. Harold turns back to Alexandra with a gentle smile, telling her not to worry about it as they continue their dance. From a distance, Monica watches them, covering her mouth with her hand to hide a smile. She thinks to herself how wonderful their dance was, noting that His Highness Harold couldn't quite hide his own smile. Alexandra's heart fluttered, her cheeks flushed with a gentle warmth. She clasped her hands together, a quiet joy filling her as she realized another one of her wishes had just been granted. He, in turn, seemed flustered by the experience, a blush creeping up his neck. Alexandra simply smiled, apologizing for any trouble she might have caused, to which he could only manage a stammered agreement. Their moment was cut short by the arrival of Lorenzo Salvatore, who approached with a placid smile and a bow. He addressed Harold directly, offering a grand apology for his earlier interruption and insisting his rudeness was unforgivable, though Harold, visibly annoyed, could only think how persistent the man was. Internally, however, Lorenzo's thoughts were far less apologetic, a smug smile gracing his lips as he silently warned them not to interfere with his own pleasant evening. He then turned his attention to Saint Christia and her knight, Cauradel Mio, declaring that they should be on their way as they couldn't keep the saint waiting. As Cauradel expressed her thanks, Christia offered a subtle wink. Lorenzo gave a final, formal farewell to Harold and Alexandra, stating that they would now take their leave. As he departed, Lorenzo remarked that he had fulfilled his minimum duties as a guide and would now leave the rest to someone else. Harold watched him go, his expression still clouded with irritation. A short distance away, the household staff, led by a senior steward, bowed in unison, their duties for the evening seemingly concluded. The steward then approached Harold, thanking him profusely for his efforts. He declared that, thanks to the prince, the first day of the event had concluded successfully. The praise from the entire staff left Harold momentarily speechless, a blush rising to his cheeks. Monica leaned in close to Alexandra, murmuring with a knowing smile that his contributions are only visible to those who are meant to see them. Harold, meanwhile, averted his gaze, still feeling as though he had done nothing of consequence. Alexandra then turned to him, her expression soft. She gently asked if he understood just how much he had devoted his heart and mind to ensuring the delegation from the Holy Kingdom was welcomed properly. He looks down at Alexandra with a gentle smile, suggesting it's time for them to depart. She gazes back at him, a blush on her cheeks, and gives a soft, happy murmur of agreement. In the background, the entire household staff, including Monica and Marion, bowed deeply as the pair prepares to leave. Against the stone wall, Prince Harold sits hunched over, consumed by despair. He sighs, muttering to himself that his situation is utterly impossible. Beside him, the cat Caspar Rieg looks on. His thoughts drift to the reason for his anxiety. His duel with Carla is today. He knows he stands absolutely no chance against a top-class physical combatant like her. Still, he hadn't expected the match to be a real duel. and he silently curses Wilfred for it. As he hugs Kasper for comfort, the cat asks if he'll be all right. Harold forces a laugh, trying to convince them both that it will all work out. He tries to compose himself just as a voice calls out his name. Alexandra has arrived, and seeing him on the ground, she wishes him a good morning before asking why he's sitting there. He scrambles to greet her in return. Alexandra advises that they should head to the training grounds immediately, stressing the importance of warming up before the match. In the distance, Carla is already doing just that, letting out a powerful cry as she swings a massive sword. Harold can only agree. As they walk, a familiar maid, Marion Seiler, spots the prince with a look of surprise. Ahead of them, Lady Carla stands poised with her sword, her focus absolute. Harold approaches his opponent, and they shake hands. He returns her formal greeting, but Carla smiles with unshakable confidence, thinking to herself that she will be the one to claim victory. A wave of dread washes over Harold. Carla holds his hand firmly, a trait befitting her reputation in the game, in Haza, as the embodiment of chivalry and a respectable heroine. She finally lets go, suggesting they save the rest for the match, before executing a powerful practice swing that makes Harold flinch. Harold watches her, reflecting that in this world, game skills don't exist. He can only imagine the grueling effort it must have taken for Carla to reach her current level of power, likely training until she spat blood. His intense staring makes Carla self-conscious, and she murmurs that it's a bit embarrassing. Startled, Harold panics and apologizes profusely. He blurts out that he was just thinking how beautiful and pretty she was. The unexpected compliment stuns Carla into a blushing silence. Realizing what he just said, Harold recoils in embarrassment as Carla manages a quiet thank you. His compliment struck Carla with the force of a physical blow, leaving her utterly flustered. Steam seemed to rise from her as she internally processed his words, thinking to herself, "I knew it." Her intense reaction sent Harold into a panic. He frantically tried to explain to Marion and Alexandra that it was all a misunderstanding, while Kasper watched from the floor. Unfazed, Alexandra calmly asked him to clarify what he could have possibly meant by thinking of Carla in such a way. Before he could formulate an answer, he was unceremoniously pulled away to prepare for the duel, collapsing onto the floor in the process. Sometime later, having finally prepared and donned his formal uniform, Harold arrived at the dueling grounds. He was taken aback to see a large, influential audience had gathered, including Christia and his brother Wilfred. He also spotted Lorenzo, Cardis, and even Raphael. Wilfred announced that with the Holy Kingdom of Balshan's delegation present to judge, both kingdoms had put their pride and prestige on the line for this match. He grimaced, realizing the situation was far more political than he had anticipated. It wasn't about the kingdom's pride, it was a setup. With everyone from the Holy Kingdom's delegation watching, it was clear they wanted to humiliate him and drive him into a corner. He suspected it was a cunning, if stupidly elaborate, plan orchestrated by either Cardis or Wilfred, or perhaps both of them working together. Across the arena, Carla, now clad in full armor, voiced her own intentions. She declared that she didn't care about the result. All she wanted was to fight Prince Harold with her full power. Harold quietly agreed, acknowledging to himself that winning didn't matter here. His sole focus was to answer her sword in kind. The two combatants faced each other, ready for battle, as the spectators watched from the sidelines. Just as the duel was about to begin, Wilfred's voice cut through the tension, calling out to Harold and demanding to know where his weapon was. In response, Harold raised a large, sturdy shield. With unwavering resolve, he declared, "My weapon is this shield." His choice of weapon drew immediate ridicule from the spectators. Prince Wilfred, flanked by his brother Cardis and other nobles, laughed openly. He mockingly asked if Harold's grand plan was simply to endure Carla's attacks without retaliation. Christia, too, covered her mouth to hide a smirk, finding the situation amusing. Unfazed by the jeers, Harold let out a confident laugh. Carla, his opponent, turned to him with a determined smile, suggesting they disregard the onlookers and simply fight with all their might. He readily agreed. With the duel underway, Carla wasted no time. "Here I come," she cried, lunging forward and bringing her sword down in a powerful arc. The blade met Harold's shield with a deafening clang. To her utter shock, the shield held firm, completely halting her momentum and absorbing the full force of the blow. In a courtyard, Prince Harold de Havels faces off against Carla, their blades locked in a swift exchange. He observes her form, seeing the skill behind her defense. He internally praises her amazing defensive ability, admitting that even a feint couldn't create an opening. Carla, meanwhile, catches her breath, feeling a surge of confidence. She reflects that after defeating Cedric, who was as strong as the heroines, and now fending off Carla's attack, she has earned the right to believe in herself more. The brief respite ends as she lunges forward with a powerful shout, her blade a blur of motion. Harold meets the strike, gritting his teeth as he tells her to take back her previous assertion. Her attack blocked, Carla's expression shifts to one of impressed amusement. She chuckles, thinking to herself that he is definitely stronger than Cedric. He, however, acknowledges the narrowness of his defense. He admits that he only just managed, and that letting his guard down for even a single instant would mean his defeat. Sensing his focus, Carla challenges him again, launching herself into another powerful, arcing strike. He grunts with the effort of parrying the blow. He knows he cannot afford any wasted movements. He must find the exact timing to exploit an opening in her relentless assault. His successful defense leaves Carla breathless with admiration. She declares that Prince Harold is the very first person to have ever blocked her attacks in such a manner. Her battle spirit ignited, Carla expresses her gratitude. She confesses she was initially reluctant to participate in the Arabiahan, but now she is thankful to have found someone so strong to trade blows with. Recalling her past as one of Inhei's worst battle maniacs, she decides to offer him a gift. Her most powerful skill, the one she prides herself on the most, my Carla del Minios. She takes a low, powerful stance, and a shock of recognition hits Harold. He has seen this scene countless times in his past life, the very technique she used to defeat so many enemies. He realizes with dread that this is the Earth attribute's most powerful secret skill. As he braced himself, Carla roared, calling out to Prince Harold as she unleashed her ultimate technique, for heaven's destruction. The technique manifested as a flurry of strikes, hammering against his defense in rapid succession. A first, a second, a third, and finally, the last decisive blow. He grunted with effort, successfully blocking the final, powerful impact. Across the training ground, Carla's eyes widened in disbelief at his resilience. Catching his breath, he reflected on the attack. He knew that even within the Inhaza style, the four heavens destruction followed a single, predictable pattern. That foreknowledge was the only reason he had been able to defend against it. Across the arena, Carla knelt on the ground, her strength spent. She was astonished that he had managed to defend against her technique so completely. The exertion took its toll. Her body locked up, rendered completely immobile by the technique's after effect. He knew that such a powerful skill came with a significant risk. Just as he remembered from the game, the side effects would paralyze Carla for several seconds. He acknowledged it was a wonderful technique nonetheless. But even with that knowledge, the force of the blows had been immense. His arm trembled as he admitted to the onlookers that he could no longer hold up his shield. Unfortunately, he had reached his limit. Hearing this admission, Lorenzo rose to his feet and made a declaration. Since Harold could no longer fight, the match was over. The victory belonged to Lady Carla del Minio. An official raises his hand, declaring the duel concluded. He proclaims Lady Carla del Minio the victor, an announcement that leaves Carla herself looking utterly bewildered. He justifies his decision by stating that Harold could do nothing more than barely defend himself with his shield. Seeing that the prince is exhausted, he believes it is the appropriate time to end the match. From his position on the ground, Harold scoffs internally at the farce. Nearby, another prince agrees with the official's assessment, remarking that it was merely a match of goodwill, not one intended to inflict injury upon Harold. Watching from the sidelines, St. Christia sighs with an air of boredom. She looks toward Carla and tells her to stop it already. Her comment enrages Carla, who shouts for Christia to shut her mouth. She argues passionately that Prince Harold completely blocked her most powerful attack, questioning how anyone could possibly call such a man weak. Christia smirks, retorting that if the fight continued, everyone would only see Harold struggling, and that as a holy knight, Carla shouldn't be bullying the weak. Refusing to yield, Carla insists that Christia is the one who should be silent. She declares that Prince Harold is truly strong and deserving of respect, but her impassioned defense fails to move the saint. The argument reaches Harold, who appears visibly flustered. He thinks to himself that everyone making these selfish assumptions and mocking remarks about him needs to stop. She then turns her attention directly to him, shouting that he must know he could be punished for this. Still crouched on the ground, Harold looks up at her and flatly calls her an idiot. His blunt insult stops her mid-sentence, her expression shifting to one of pure surprise. He then rises, extending a hand with a warm smile. He thanks her very much, adding that he truly enjoyed their match. His unexpected offer leaves Carla momentarily speechless. Her eyes widen as she looks at Prince Harold, a mix of surprise and gratitude on her face as she quietly acknowledges his words. He then formally proposes that they have another match sometime in the future, one where no one else can interfere. With a bright, sincere smile, Carla accepts his proposition, her spirits clearly lifted. With the matter settled, he turns to Alexandra and Marion, signaling that it is time for them to depart. They walk away, leaving Carla and the remaining crowd behind. From a distance, St. Christia watches the exchange, her expression unreadable as she observes Harold's departure. Later, in a private room, Harold lets out a weary sigh, admitting that the day's events were exhausting. Alexandra, however, offers him gentle reassurance, telling him that he did his very best. Their conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Lorenzo Salvatore, who requests a private word with Prince Harold. The sudden appearance of the cardinal's son catches both Harold and Alexandra by surprise. Before Harold can respond, Alexandra steps forward, her expression hardening. She confronts Lorenzo directly, questioning if he wasn't the one rudely laughing at Harold's match earlier. She calls his request shameless. Lorenzo appears flustered by the accusation, admitting that her anger is justified. Despite this, he persists, asking if it would truly be impossible to speak with the prince. Harold remains silent, thoughtfully considering the tense situation. An invitation from the mastermind himself. Harold D. Hovels knew this couldn't be anything good. He weighed his options, realizing that if he didn't accept, it might trigger a disastrous outcome. Alexandra, sensing his hesitation, asked if he would really accept. He turned to her, his mind made up. He didn't know what Lorenzo's plan was, but he would hear him out for now. However, he vowed internally that if the plan involved hurting Alexandra, he would stop it at all costs. With resolve, he declared he would go. Having made his decision, he gave a small wave and announced he would be off for a bit, leaving to meet with Lorenzo. Upon his arrival, Lorenzo Salvatore stood waiting by a sunlit window, greeting him with a welcoming smile and thanking him for accepting the invitation. Harold approached cautiously, stating that he had heard Lorenzo wish to speak with him. The other young man simply gestured for him to follow, leading him further into the room. He cut through the pleasantries, stating he was only there to listen and that Lorenzo shouldn't trouble himself with formalities. Internally, he braced himself, certain that whatever was coming wouldn't be good. Lorenzo simply laughed, conceding that Harold had beaten him to the punch. Getting right to the main topic, Lorenzo began to explain the political situation. The Holy Kingdom, he revealed, is currently split into two opposing factions, one supporting the Pope, known as the conservative faction, and another composed of younger priests like himself, the reformists. He continued, clarifying that amidst this division, there is only one neutral party, Saintis Christia. Lorenzo admitted that he had tried to invite her to join his faction before, but had yet to receive a definitive answer. This, he explained, was why he had accompanied the Saintis on her delegation to this kingdom. His primary hope was to win her over to his cause during their stay. Harold processed the information, summarizing what he understood. Lorenzo wanted his help to win over the Saintis. Lorenzo acknowledged that he would gladly appreciate the help, but clarified that wasn't quite his request, leaving Harold to wonder what he truly meant. He listened as Lorenzo made his request to guide the saint to the right path. The words struck him with the force of a physical blow, triggering a sudden, panicked realization. This was it, the Saintis kidnapping incident from the original story's plot. The prince then recounted the events as they were supposed to unfold. In the city of Inhaza, Saintis Christia would suddenly disappear one day. In response, the kingdom would seal its borders and shorelines to begin a massive investigation. But their efforts would be fruitless. They would never find her. He explained that Wilfred and the other heroines would do their best to search for the missing Saintis. However, the villainous Prince Harold would use every tool at his disposal to get in their way, actively obstructing the search. Despite Harold's meddling, the heroes would eventually discover Christia confined within a port city. They would defeat the mastermind behind the plot, Lorenzo, and safely rescue her, clearing the event. Returning to the present, Lorenzo laid out his proposition. If Harold were to cooperate with him, the Holy Kingdom would undoubtedly lend its considerable support to him in return. He pressed his advantage, detailing the potential rewards. With the Holy Kingdom's power, Harold's current standing could easily be overturned. He suggested that Harold's mother would slowly grant him the trust and favor she had bestowed upon the first prince, completely washing away the humiliation from his earlier defeat in the duel. His words struck a chord. Harold smirked internally, impressed. Lorenzo had certainly done his research. He even knew that the original Harold had been desperate for his mother's love. He let a confident smirk spread across his face. Fine, he declared, his voice steady. Understood. I shall accept this request. He decided then and there to play along with Lorenzo's proposal. His internal monologue continued as they shook hands, sealing the pact. To avoid the bad end, he had to act in a way befitting his title. After all, he was the incompetent, villainous prince. The memory of that agreement faded as the scene shifted. Now, in his pajamas, Haru slumped over a table with a heavy sigh. He lamented to himself that today was the day of the Royal Academy observation. Beside him, Kasparig placed a comforting paw on his head, asking if he was okay. He is jolted from his thoughts by Monica, his maid, who informs him that it is time to get ready. She adds that the young lady has already arrived. The reminder sends a shock through him. Realizing the time, he springs out of bed, announcing that he will go and change immediately. At the gates of the Royal Academy, an attendant formally addresses Prince Harold, informing him of a message from His Excellency, the Emperor. Harold stands beside Monica, who holds the small black cat, Kasparig. His expression hardens as he asks Monica what Prince Salvatore's intentions are. She reports that after their observation of the Academy, they're to be guided to a specific location. Harold immediately understands the situation. This is a coup de main, a swift, decisive strike. He envisions Saint Christia, realizing she is the key to this maneuver, intended to seize the initiative from him. He instructs Monica to relay his acceptance to the Emperor. Turning to the attendant, Harold asks if he can be relied upon for this task. The man bows, assuring the prince he is at his service, while Monica smiles, ready to carry out her orders. With the attendant gone, he strokes Kasparig's head and murmurs that it is time for them to prepare as well. The cat responds with a quiet affirmation. Inside the academy, a group of students, including Harold and Christia, are gathered. It is explained that the Royal Academy accepts many exceptional international students, fostering an environment where they can interact freely, regardless of their social standing. An academy guide offers to begin the tour, but Saint Christia interrupts, turning her full attention to Harold. She asks if he is indeed Prince Harold, then states she has something to ask him and requests a moment of his time. With a knowing smile, she adds that after being watched by him with such a heated gaze, she simply cannot accept no for an answer. She confidently tells Harold to lead her away, and he readily agrees. The two of them walk off together down a quiet hallway, leaving the rest of the group behind. As they walk, Christia asks where he is taking her. With a mischievous smile, Harold replies that it is a place where the two of them can be alone. Christia playfully calls him a wicked man. He opens a door to a small room, acknowledging that while it may be a bit cramped, no one will disturb them there. He invites her to talk for as long as time permits. She is visibly pleased, a blush warming her cheeks. She hadn't expected Prince Harold to be so passionate and direct. Internally, she thinks that she must reevaluate her opinion of him, feeling honored by his forwardness. She watches in shock as Lorenzo Salvatore steps forward, a confident smirk on his face. He addresses her directly, telling her that he will handle things from this point on and thanking Prince Harold for his efforts. He then turns to Prince Harold, offering a disingenuous apology. Lorenzo explains that he was personally asked by the Emperor to escort the saint, implying Harold's involvement is no longer needed. He accepts the explanation without argument, confirming that the Valtion Holy Kingdom will not withhold its promised support. Lorenzo praises Harold's understanding, formally introducing himself as Lorenzo II Salvatore. A sharp, knowing grin spreads across his face. As Lorenzo confidently states that with the saint in their possession, everything is simple, Harold cuts him off. He tells Lorenzo to look forward to a certain moment, only to add with chilling certainty that such an opportunity will never arrive. In that instant, a tremendous force slams into Lorenzo's face, sending him reeling backward. The impact is so powerful it cracks the stone wall behind him. Through the shattered wall steps a woman in full plate armor. Her fist is still extended from the blow as she roars at the fallen man, calling him a sinner and demanding he conduct himself properly. The armored knight furiously points her sword at Lorenzo Salvatore, calling him a sinner and demanding his silence. Lorenzo looks on in shock. Below them, Harold de Havel smirks, explaining to the knight that Lorenzo is a villain and that this entire confrontation was a stage he prepared for her to use. He continues, revealing that he decided to stop her the moment he learned she was investigating the Saintis abduction incident. A memory flashes through his mind. If the incident were carried out as planned, he would be blamed, leading to the dissolution of his engagement to Alexandra and a disastrous end for himself. Across from him, Lorenzo sits defeated on the ground, admitting he's been caught. Harold declares that he is doing this to protect the things that are important to him. Lorenzo expresses his surprise, remarking that he never imagined Harold could so perfectly imitate the role of an incompetent evil prince. He touches a bruise on his cheek, recalling that he had only told Harold about this classroom's existence that very morning. He muses that it should have been impossible for Harold to have grasped the layout of the hidden passages so quickly. Harold simply stands and listens. His contemplation turns to fury. Lorenzo points a finger accusingly at Harold, demanding to know the full extent of his knowledge. Harold's expression hardens as he stares back. Then, just as quickly, his anger vanishes. Lorenzo smiles serenely, waving a hand as if to dismiss the entire affair. He concedes that this attempt was a failure and says he will simply wait for the next opportunity. He lunges forward in a blur of motion, but Christia remains perfectly calm. She asks if he truly thinks he can escape, explaining that Hal has already prepared the area. At her side, Monica clarifies that she is using the Saintis' boundary stone to seal the room. Lorenzo looks back to see Harold and his entire retinue assembled. Harold explains that Lorenzo attempting to escape by transforming his body was anticipated, and that Monica was assigned to counter it. He praises Monica for her excellent work before presenting Lorenzo with two choices: be captured or be defeated on the spot. Enraged, Lorenzo demands to know when Harold began colluding with the Saintis. Harold reveals that Christia prepared a means for him to retaliate immediately after the orders party concluded. He dismisses Lorenzo's promises as meaningless, stating that this is not a negotiation. Lorenzo glares, realizing he has no option but to leave. The truth is finally revealed. Lorenzo is the true culprit behind the Saintis abduction incident, a vampire possessing the dark attribute. He is the very antagonist who had been tormenting the original protagonist, skillfully using dark skills he had only just now been forced to expose. Across from the trapped vampire, Saint Christia stood with serene confidence. As the sole wielder of holy attribute magic in this world, her very presence was a natural counter, a divine nemesis to a creature of darkness. With her power as his backing, Harold pointed accusingly. He declared that with Lorenzo's true nature exposed and his abilities neutralized by the Saintis, there was no hope of victory, urging him to surrender quietly. In the shadows of his own hair, a wicked grin spread across Lorenzo's face. He burst into laughter, a hand dramatically covering his face. He mockingly asked Harold if something was amiss, expressing disbelief that his grand plans could have been thwarted by the so-called incompetent brat prince. He then conceded Harold's point. He could not escape from this place. Harold stared, bewildered by the vampire's nonchalance. He could not understand why Lorenzo was so composed, so utterly at ease in this situation. Lorenzo simply smiled, explaining that the incompetent brat prince had left him no choice. He would have to use it. With a sudden movement, a dark, spherical object in his hand was crushed. The intricate magical circle that had sealed the room shattered instantly, its light extinguished. He threw his arms wide, his laughter echoing in the now unsealed chamber. He issued a new command. If they wished to live, they would repent for their previous attitude and hand over Saint Christia immediately. The saintess herself looked on, holding the shattered remnants of the boundary stone, her calm demeanor finally broken. From a high window, Harold de Hovels and Caspar Rieg are startled by a flash of light. Harold wonders what just happened, his gaze drawn to the sky where a massive, monstrous bird materializes from crackling energy. The creature looms over the building, a great strange bird. Harold identifies it with dread, Vesfalner. Its massive talons extend as it descends. Below, panic erupts in a courtyard as students scatter. They cry out that a demon beast has appeared. Harold watches the chaos unfold, his expression hardening. He grits his teeth in frustration. He had hoped to resolve matters quietly before the Holy Kingdom's forces arrived, but now, with everyone watching, that is no longer possible. Elsewhere, Lorenzo Salvatore is confronted by Cowardel Mio, Christia, and Marion Seiler. The three women stand ready, acknowledging his presence with grim determination. Before he can act, magical chains erupt from the ground, binding him tightly. Christia laughs, declaring that he will not escape. Nearby, Harold and Marion watch the sudden development in shock. He struggles against the chains, gritting his teeth and muttering his own name, Lorenzo, in frustration. Seeing the capture, Harold turns to Christia and urgently demands that she tell him how to stop the rampaging demon beast. But it is Lorenzo who answers, a smug grin spreading across his face. He declares that it's impossible. He reveals that he destroyed the precious egg Vesfalner was guarding, ensuring the beast's grudge will not cease until its rampage is complete. As he gloats, the cold steel of a massive sword is pressed against his throat. Alexandre Chevalier stands over him, a chilling smile on her face. She calls him a fool, stating that summoning a bird like that won't change the final outcome. With the immediate crisis averted, Harold reflected on their success. They had managed to nullify Christia's destined path and avoid the bad end that awaited them. This left them with a larger problem, the monstrous Vesfalner. There was no need to deliberately engage such a powerful raid boss, especially since they knew the kingdom had already abandoned the academy's students, leaving them to fend for themselves. Despite the grim news, Harold turned to his companion perched on his shoulder. He asked Caspar Rieg if he could count on him, and the cat affirmed without hesitation, ready for what was to come. With a surge of energy, the small cat landed on the ground and grew to the size of a large panther. From a nearby rooftop, Harold gave the command to go, and Caspar Rieg confirmed, leaping into action. As they soared through the air, he called out to Alexandra and Monica below, declaring that he would act as a decoy and absorb all of the giant creature's attacks. Hearing his declaration, Monica confidently told Alexandra to leave it to them, and Alexandra agreed. With their support secured, Harold flew directly towards the monstrous bird as it let out a piercing cry. It lunged forward, but Harold managed to block the powerful strike. The fact that he could defend against it meant Vesfalner's level was likely 100 or less. A realization dawned on him. They might just stand a chance. He knew, however, that Vesfalner possessed a dangerous ability called homing. The creature could launch its feathers, which would relentlessly pursue their target until they made impact. Even so, he resolved to face it, planning to have the kingdom deal with the beast once he arrived. The creature unleashed a volley of its dark, hardened feathers. One of the massive projectiles flew directly at Harold, striking him squarely. But instead of being impaled, he caught the massive feather with a confident grin. He taunted the beast, calling it foolish for thinking it could win with a mere feather. He knew that once a homing feather hit its target, it lost its tracking effect. With this new weapon in hand, a plan began to form. With a grating screech, the great bird Vesfalner lunges, but Harold de Hovels stands his ground, blocking the attack with his massive weapon. He maneuvers carefully, thinking that if he can just lure the beast a little closer, he'll have it right where he wants it. Elsewhere, seeing the beast's attention fixed on Harold, Lorenzo Salvatore seizes the opportunity. He shouts to Marion and his other companions that the creature is distracted and that now is their chance to escape, leading them in a desperate flight down a corridor. As they flee, Marion Seiler glances back, remarking with a hint of surprise that Lorenzo is quite perceptive. He, however, simply looks ahead, his face etched with strain and urgency. Back in the fray, a confident smirk spreads across Harold's face. He reflects on his growth, acknowledging that he is no longer just a useless, villainous prince. The special training, the devoted support of his fiancée Alexandra and Monica, and gaining Caspar Rieg as a partner have all forged him into something stronger. He rejects his predetermined role. He is not a mere stepping stone, not some supporting character to be overshadowed. With this renewed conviction, he charges forward. His gaze drifts towards a high balcony where Alexandra watches. He declares with fierce determination that as long as she is watching him, he will become the main character. He meets another of Vesfalner's attacks head-on, the impact ringing through the air. He taunts the beast, asking if that's all it has and warning it not to underestimate him. Suddenly, the beast vanishes from his sight. Harold looks up, startled, wondering if it flew away. From the balcony, Alexandra and Monica cry out his name in alarm, their eyes fixed on the sky above. His attention snaps towards them. Realizing they are now the target, he roars a command for them to stay back, his voice filled with urgency. He understands what he must do. With a determined expression, he launches himself into the air, weapon held ready to intercept the threat. He soared through the air, realizing the great bird was preparing to use a specific skill to take him down. Bracing himself for the inevitable, he knew the attack was imminent. From the ground below, Alexandra cried out his name as a brilliant flash erupted in the sky. He was caught in the blast, a powerful force pressing against him. He recognized it immediately. This was Solsort, Vesfalner's ultimate skill. Despite the overwhelming pressure, his resolve did not waver. He knew this was not the end. With a defiant roar, he fought against the relentless torrent of energy. He understood the nature of the attack. Solsort was a multi-hit assault, impossible to block with the inward defensive skill. However, it had a critical weakness. It could only target a single individual. This was the optimal strategy. By making himself the sole target, he ensured the safety of everyone else. He had intentionally chosen to fight without a weapon, relying on engage hazard, a technique only he could master, as the one and only way to achieve victory. In a flash, the confrontation reached its climax. The great bird crashed to the earth, its massive form still. Atop its back sat Harold victorious. Below, Alexandra and Monica watched in awe and relief, Alexandra whispering his name in reverence. From his perch, Prince Harold calls out to his companions, Alexandra and Monica. Alexandra, mid-leap, marvels at the splendid battle he has orchestrated. Monica, equally eager, declares that they will beautifully purge the great bird. In response, the two women launch themselves into a coordinated attack, their blades flashing as they descend upon their massive target with fierce battle cries. Watching them, Harold sits back with a satisfied smile, the great bird Vesfalner now perched calmly beside him. He reflects internally on the overwhelming power he now commands. His thoughts drift to a memory of the Holy Knight, Coward El Mio, unleashing a powerful technique, the Four Heavenly Kings Annihilation Slash. He recalls his own assessment of it, the Sword of God's Grace. The demonstration over, St. Christia approaches, taking Harold's hands in hers. She looks at him with admiration, telling him his performance was truly magnificent. She continues, mentioning that while she had heard about the situation from Carla, she hadn't expected this level of power. With a knowing smile, she concludes that her judgment of him was not mistaken and that any excuses would be pointless. Later, Lorenzo Salvatore explains to his companions that he has two objectives for his visit. Christia elaborates. The first is to monitor Lorenzo, a political pawn of the church. The second, a long-term goal, is to determine which prince the Holy Kingdom should align with in the De Havil's kingdom. Raphael adds that the Holy Kingdom seeks an alliance not with the monarch, but with the power surrounding the throne. Lorenzo specifies that the two candidates are Prince Harold and Prince Wilfred. He acknowledges that Wilfred's standing is improving rapidly, but declares that he has already judged him unworthy of an alliance. Christia listens, her expression troubled as she thinks to herself that, above all else, she cannot trust Harold. Elsewhere, Harold muses on this very reputation, wondering what he could have possibly done to be seen as a scheming heroine. He smirks, realizing that this very suspicion is what has drawn the Holy Kingdom's attention to him. For someone like him, with no backing in the kingdom, gaining their support presents a significant advantage in his quest to avoid a bad end. He walks with Christia, who explains that in the event of a bad end, she has already secured an escape route for the Holy Kingdom. She then produces a contract, formalizing the alliance between her and his party, and asks him to take care of her. Her sudden affability catches him off guard. He wonders why she's being so forward when he knows she is a scheming, cunning individual. The moment is shattered as a massive, dark shadow falls over them. The great strange bird, Vesfalner, descends with terrifying speed, its talons aimed directly at Christia. Harold's eyes widen in shock. Without hesitation, he shoves Christia aside. The creature's claws slam into the ground where she had been standing, shattering the stone and sending a spray of dark energy into the air. He looks on, his hands still outstretched from the push, a stunned expression on his face as he processes the sudden, violent attack. His thoughts race, questioning why a homing attack would be directed at Alexandra's small body. From a distance, Alexandra herself watches with a cheerful, untroubled smile. As he faces the colossal beast, Kasparig suddenly appears on his shoulder in its cat form, announcing that the creature's transformation has been broken. With a grim look, Harold identifies their foe as an eliminator. In response, he raises his hand. A complex magical sigil, glowing with dark power, materializes in his palm. He clenches his fist, and the sigil flares as shadowy energy erupts and coalesces around his arm, forming into a massive, ethereal gauntlet. The great bird recoils, its body contorting as if struck by an immense, unseen force. With a final surge of power, he unleashes the spell. A colossal fist made of pure shadow manifests and smashes into Vestfulner, the impact echoing across the courtyard with a sickening crunch. On the ground, a young man with a tail lies exhausted, weakly calling out a name. His cat-like companion, Xandra, cries on his chest, expressing how worried they were. The young man apologizes, his thoughts shifting to the battle. He recalls that their manga connection was suddenly severed, just before a giant hand appeared and crushed their enemy. Standing amidst the rubble with her greatsword planted in the ground, the Saintess, Hal, chuckles softly. She marvels internally at the amazing power the young man, whom she calls Hal-sama, had been holding back. She then flies towards the young man, calling his name. He shouts for Xandra as he moves to catch the approaching Saintess, holding her securely in his arms. A few days later, at the Royal Palace training grounds, the young man spars with a dark-haired warrior named Carla. She unleashes a powerful technique, the Four Heavens Destruction, forcing him to cry out as he struggles to block the blow. On the sidelines, two maids watch the duel with admiration. One, Lila Scarlet, also known as Monica, asks her companion if she saw the display, declaring it was wonderful. After the match, the young man shakes hands with Carla, thanking her for the bout. She enthusiastically returns the sentiment, addressing him formally as Lady Carla in a slip of the tongue before thanking him as well. Carla dismisses his thanks, saying it's all right. She then mentions that it has been 3 days since the Saintess kidnapping incident caused by Lorenz and asks about his duty as the Saintess's guard. He laughs, explaining that since there are other holy knights in the delegation, he has been given free time to train. Carla smiles, seemingly satisfied with his answer. Suddenly, a hooded princess appears beside him, startling him. She thanks Carla for accompanying her today, her expression smug. Princess adds that she will do so as long as Prince Harold asks for it. Her attention then shifts to the Saintess, Hal, who has just arrived. With a sharp smile, the princess remarks that it appears the Saintess wants her bones buried in their kingdom. Palpable animosity in the air was becoming unbearable for Prince Harold. Shaking his head as if to clear it, he turned to the Saintess and attempted to change the subject, asking what brought her to the training grounds. In response, Saintess Hal explained the situation regarding Lorenz. Weiss Vincent, who stood nearby, noted that Lorenz was supposed to have been escorted away for a thorough investigation, but Hal revealed she had just received a letter from His Holiness with new instructions. Harold, intrigued, asked for more details. She elaborated that while they don't know for sure, it seems Lorenz has been muttering strange things, possibly as a result of the shock from his recent ordeal. Though Hal expressed some reluctance, she affirmed that with these new orders, she and Carla must return. At that moment, the princess tightened her grip on Harold's arm, pointing out that this means the Saintess and Carla will be attending the Royal Academy in a year's time, just as they are. Accepting this future, the Saintess smiled warmly. She agreed that it was so, and bid Prince Harold farewell for now, promising they would meet again on that day. She spoke. The princess's expression darkened with a possessive fury. She declared that Prince Harold, and she supposed Alexandra as well, would be hers, leaving Harold stunned by her intensity. Carla, standing beside the Saintess, added her own farewell. She too looked forward to the day they would meet again and proposed another meeting in a year's time, reinforcing their shared future at the academy. The goodbyes said, the princess watched them depart, a triumphant smirk spreading across her face. She laughed, declaring that the nuisances had finally left and suggested to Harold that they resume their delayed training. Her words prompted a complaint from her maid, Monica, who lamented feeling lonely because Harold had been so occupied with the Saintess and Carla. Harold cried out in exasperation, only for his companion Xandra to agree, stating that Harold hadn't been paying him any attention either. Princess, with Monica now at her side, looked down at the flustered prince with a smug smile. She condescendingly asked if he had finished resolving himself, savoring his discomfort. The training grounds, Prince Harold stands alone, lost in thought. He still doesn't understand why the Eliminator's skill manifested from his crest of de Hovels during the fight with Vedderfolner, wondering why a power he dismissed as useless would suddenly develop in such a way. He recalls that after defeating the beast, the crest reverted to its original form. Staring at his hand, he questions the nature of the skill, a power that doesn't even exist in the world of the game. Engage Hazard. His companion, Xandra, watches with a quizzical tilt of her head as he continues to ponder. He's tried to activate the power many times since, but nothing has happened, leaving him just waving his hand about. Still, he reasons that as long as Xandra is safe, everything is fine, though the mystery lingers. Thoughts drift to Sanus Hal. He remembers the critical moment it seemed Xandra would be crushed, only for Hal to intervene in the nick of time. A truly reliable heroine, he thinks to himself, pulled from his reverie. He sees Hal approaching him with a look of concern. She asks if something is the matter, but he quickly brushes it off, assuring her it's nothing. Footsteps echo on an empty balcony, signaling a departure. Elsewhere, the hooded princess stands alone, reflecting on recent events. She sighs, thinking to herself that it seems she still has a ways to go. Smirk crosses her face as she continues her thoughts. She had made sure to wear a mask for the occasion, acting as a saint should, but she's vexed that her true nature was seen through so easily. To make matters worse, the one who saw through her was none other than Prince Harold, the man everyone calls incompetent and villainous. Meanwhile, Weiss Vincent reports his findings. He explains that according to the information he gathered, the public's opinion of Prince Harold is the absolute worst. He is seen as having no qualifications to be a prince, regarded as nothing more than one of Prince Cardus's underlings. Weiss continues his report to two civil officials, contrasting the rumors with reality. He notes that Harold possessed enough strength to withstand all of the giant demonic beast attacks by himself. In truth, Weiss concludes, Harold played his part as a host perfectly, and as a result, many of the civil officials have now placed their trust in him. Hooded Princess reflects on recent events, a faint blush on her cheeks. She muses on how easily Prince Harold managed to affect her emotionally. More importantly, she considers his influence on others, noting with surprise that he even succeeded in getting the notoriously difficult Carla to open up to him. Her reverie is broken as Carla approaches, having finally found her. The knight expresses concern, advising the princess to go inside before she catches a cold. After thanking Carla for her worry, the princess turns to her with a pointed question, asking for her opinion on Prince Harold. As they gaze out at a ship sailing across the open sea, a shared sentiment is voiced. It would be nice, they agree, if they too had such a chance. Sprawled on the ground after a grueling training session, Harold gasps for breath, managing a faint but sincere word of thanks. Looking down at him, Hal smiles warmly. She confesses that she can no longer see the limits of his talent. While she thought she had grown stronger, and he no longer seems to be improving physically, he continues to advance in other ways. Sits up, now in casual attire, pondering her compliment. He supposes this means his physical abilities are now maxed out, reaffirming his belief that he has always been a magic type. However, the thought of his mysterious, unnamed skill still lingers in his mind, a problem for another time. Deciding not to worry about it for now, he turns his attention to his companions, praising both Hal and his familiar, Cass, for their good work. He gives the purring Xandra an affectionate pat on the head. He holds Xandra close, his expression hardening with resolve. He reaffirms his promise to grow stronger, not alone, but together with his trusted partner. As he sits with Hal, Carla approaches, announcing that a letter has arrived for Prince Harold from the Holy Kingdom. She identifies the sender as Christia, noting with a hint of weariness that she has been sending messages every 2 days. Harold takes the letter, wondering aloud what the vixen could want now. He explains to a questioning Hal that Christia's letters are always filled with insistent requests for them to meet alone or for him to move to the Holy Kingdom, adding that Xandra has been dutifully ripping them apart each time. Casual demeanor vanishes as he reads the contents. Behind him, Hal's expression darkens with fury, her hands clenching into fists. What does she want to tell you this time? She asks, her voice tight with anger. A look of utter shock washes over Harold's face. He turns to Hal, the letter trembling in his hand, and delivers the horrifying news. Lorenz is going to be executed. Message reveals the grim truth. Weiss Vincent, also known as Lorenz, has been held captive in the Holy Kingdom, suffering continuous torture. Despite the agony, he has never uttered a single word. Smirked, even in the face of his dire situation. A thought crossed his mind that there should have been someone else behind the plot, but at this rate, it seemed he would be the only one to fall. News of his rival's capture, however, led Harold to a dead end. As he scanned the rest of the letter, he found little else of substance. Focus was broken when the young woman with pink hair spoke up, reading from another official document. She announced that it was a decree from His Majesty, stating that when the Saintess studies abroad, Wilfred will be her guardian. As she spoke, Carla, noticing Harold's distress, asked if something had happened. The pieces suddenly clicked into place for Harold. He recalled a past conversation with Weiss, where Harold had correctly predicted the king's intentions. He had noted that His Majesty clearly wanted all attention focused on Weiss, not on himself. That conversation had taken place after the Holy Kingdom's delegation departed. King Evil had praised them both, but Harold remembered with bitterness how he was treated as a mere add-on. The vast majority of the praise was directed at Weiss, whom the king referred to as Wilfred. Even when Minister Olsen attempted to highlight Harold's accomplishments, he was largely ignored. To compound the insult, a gag order was placed on the entire incident involving Lorenz and Vetter Folner, effectively erasing it from the official record. Meanwhile, as Harold was lost in his memories, Carla's thoughts were on a completely different matter. She was psyching herself up to invite Xandra to a meal, but her resolve quickly crumbled into flustered panic. She realized how difficult nonchalantly inviting someone was, worrying she would put the other girl on the spot. Her internal struggle was interrupted when the Saintess, Hal, appeared. She announced that she had prepared a meal for Prince Harold and the young lady, and asked if they would like to join her. Internally, Hal worried that her actions might have been presumptuous, but she was keen to stay in Harold's good graces. Her timing was perfect, Carla eagerly accepted, and Harold admitted he was quite famished. Grand dining hall, plates of food are carefully placed upon a long, gleaming table, set for 3. The room is silent, filled with an air of quiet anticipation. Meal has begun. Prince Harold and the Saintess, Hal, are seated at the table, with Carla standing attentively behind Hal. The atmosphere is palpably tense, punctuated by the subtle tap of a boot under the table. This tense quiet is shattered by the arrival of Weiss Vincent. He cheerfully greets Harold as big brother and Hal as sister-in-law. Harold immediately challenges him, demanding to know why he is in the castle and telling him to return to the annex. Internally, Harold wonders if Weiss has already learned about the letter from the Holy Kingdom. Weiss, however, simply smiles and explains that he was summoned by His Majesty. He continues, his smile never faltering, adding that the summons naturally includes his sister-in-law as well. He chides Harold not to be so harsh, suggesting that a meal together should be a fine thing. Hal's expression grows cold. She feels nothing. Composure finally cracks. With a sharp glare, she commands Weiss to never call her sister-in-law in her presence again. Weiss seems momentarily taken aback, murmuring that he understands, as Harold watches with a grim smirk, seeing the true depth of her animosity. Gaining his poise, Weiss formally addresses Hal as Lady Alexandra, suggesting they dine together another time. As he turns to leave, Harold watches him, noting the implied threat in his words and questioning his true motives. As Weiss and Carla walk away, Harold calls out, telling his big brother to stop his games. He declares that Weiss should know his place and realize he is nothing more than a stepping stone for Harold's own plans. Harold grimly notes to himself that Weiss is no longer even bothering to put on an act. Harold's cutting words leave Hal seething. She mutters how utterly unpleasant Weiss is, the same as he's always been. Carla places a hand on her shoulder, urging her to calm down. Beside them, Harold's own hand clenches into a tight, white-knuckled fist. A moment later, Hal's fury gives way to sudden embarrassment. Her face flushes as she covers her mouth, wondering aloud if her outburst was unsightly. She then buries her face in her hands, groaning in mortification. Harold stares, completely taken aback. He watches her, realizing with a jolt that he never knew her eyes changed color when she became emotional, nor that this vulnerable side of her existed outside of combat. He is stunned to learn she might have a complex about her deep crimson eyes, a detail he had never once considered. He stares at her crimson eyes, the source of her complex, and finds himself momentarily lost for words. After a brief pause, he finally speaks, telling her that he finds them very beautiful. Saintess Hal is utterly stunned, her mouth agape in disbelief. Shock instantly melts into pure delight. With a happy little laugh, she throws her arms around the startled Harold, pulling him into a tight embrace over the breakfast table and thanking him profusely. Carla, standing nearby, can only watch the chaotic display. He yelps in flustered confusion, completely overwhelmed by her sudden and powerful show of affection. Down on the floor, the cat-like Xandra gives a silent thumbs up, clearly approving of this turn of events. As the excitement settles, he gently takes her hand. He begins to address her formally as Halsama, but then corrects himself, softly calling her by the name she entrusted to him. Xandra, gazing at him with adoration, she affirms his words. She tells him with absolute certainty that he can become strong, even stronger than she is. Unwavering faith resonates within him. He internally admits that he lacks any confidence when faced with Xandra's overwhelming strength. However, he realizes the most important thing is that his beloved fiancée believes in him, and so he has no choice but to exceed her expectations. His thoughts turn to his rival. He knows it is about time for Weiss, or Wilfred, the protagonist of Lenhaza, to make his move backed by King Evil. But Harold doesn't care. He clenches his fist, vowing that this stepping stone will bear its own fangs and crush the future predetermined by the original story. He is prepared. The table set for tea. Saint Ishal rests her chin on her gloved hands, sighing her own name in a display of profound boredom. Her attention shifts to Prince Harold, who is absorbed in a letter. He reads that it is from Christia, who wishes for the Kabadיר and De Havel's kingdoms to restore diplomatic relations. Annoyed that her tea time is being ignored, Hal tells him to stop reading, though she admits her own curiosity about the letter's contents. As Hal complains, Carla interrupts, apologizing for her presumptuousness as she presents a cake to Prince Harold. She reminds him that their kingdoms are currently in a ceasefire after having been at war with each other for the past 300 years. Continuing her argument, Carla states that restoring diplomatic relations is, frankly, impossible. She questions what possible merit there could be for Harold to follow through with Christia's request. With a frustrated expression, Harold mutters that he is already aware of this. He internalizes her words, realizing she is completely right. The question echoes in his mind. Does he even really need to go? Agreeing that Carla's point is true, Harold decides he will simply have to politely decline. He muses that he doesn't have time to worry about other kingdoms, as he must get stronger before the main story begins. In the background, Carla is pleased to see Xandra enjoying a treat. Just as Harold concludes that they can now enjoy their tea without brooding over the matter, Minister Olsen bursts into the room, urgently calling for the prince. Minister seems flustered, surprised to have found him. As Hal glares, visibly annoyed by another interruption, Harold asks Olsen what matter required his attention. Suddenly, Harold bolts from the room, apologizing to a startled Xandra and telling it to wait for him. He rushes past the minister, leaving Hal behind, who cries out in protest at his abrupt departure. He catches up to Minister Olsen and asks what he wanted to discuss. The minister explains that they have just received an official letter from the Kabadיר Kingdom. Listened in disbelief as King Evil explained the contents of the official letter. After a decade of ceasefire, the Kabadיר Kingdom now sought to open diplomatic talks with the De Havel's kingdom, believing a formal agreement was finally within reach. Struggling to process the information, he frantically asked Minister Olsen for confirmation, pleading for him to wait. The minister calmly affirmed the letter's contents, pointing to the official seal of the Kabadיר Kingdom as irrefutable proof. His mind raced. He understood the gravity of the situation, but couldn't fathom his own involvement. He questioned Minister Olsen directly, asking why this matter was being brought to him and what possible connection it could have to his duties. In response, the minister declared with a broad smile that they would be honored if Prince Harold himself were to join the diplomatic talks. The prince cried out in shock, protesting that it was impossible and that his older brothers should be the ones to go. Minister Olsen countered, explaining that he specifically wanted Harold to attend because he believed the prince was the most fitting person to bear the responsibility, especially given the grave risk of war should the negotiations fail. The minister elaborated, stating that he had personally witnessed the prince's character and his dedication. It was this very nature, Olsen insisted, that made him the ideal representative. The prince, however, was lost in his own thoughts, grappling with the irony. He wondered how someone with the moniker incompetent villainous prince and a terrible reputation could possibly serve as a representative, fearing he might only make matters worse. The prince wrestled with his insecurities. Minister Olsen's expression turned serious. He assured Harold that his earlier words were not mere flattery. He genuinely wished for the prince to become the next king. The unexpected declaration left Harold momentarily stunned as the minister let out a soft chuckle. Overwhelmed by the revelation, he grabbed at his collar, exclaiming that Minister Olsen was far too whimsical. He then realized it wasn't just the minister. All the kingdom's civil officials were the same. With a cheerful point, Olsen readily agreed. Minister then revealed the full extent of their maneuvering. They had already secured permission from both the king and the chancellor, a feat Harold found baffling given the existence of his brothers. Olsen confidently stated that with such a capable foreign affairs minister, the country's future was secure. All that remained, he declared, was for His Highness to simply agree. Cornered and outmaneuvered, he let out a sigh of resignation. Seeing that the minister had gone to such lengths, he conceded that he had no other choice and agreed to participate, but stipulated that it would be for this one time only. Upon hearing his consent, Minister Olsen's face lit up with joy. He seized the prince's hands, thanking him profusely for his cooperation, much to Harold's continued exasperation. Mr. Olsen expresses his firm belief that Prince Harold will make the upcoming negotiations a success. After the minister's departure, Harold asks Saint Ishal about their discussion. She explains that succeeding in negotiations with the Kabadir Kingdom, a long-standing enemy, will dramatically improve his reputation both at home and abroad, silencing any detractors. Meanwhile, Carla voices her concerns to the maid, Lilith. She states her opposition to the plan, highlighting the danger. The negotiations are with the Kabadir Kingdom, a nation they have fought for a long time, and Prince Harold himself, a member of the royal family, will be present. Words echo Harold's own internal thoughts. He believes they must be cautious regarding his personal safety during this mission. Concern is palpable, but Saint Ishal addresses Lilith, who she calls Monica, with unwavering confidence. She reminds the maid that their very purpose is to be there for him, declaring her own desire to protect the prince to the very end. The intensity of Hal's declaration startles Lilith, who wonders if Hal is pressuring her. Saint Ishal, in turn, is taken aback by the maid's reaction, questioning if Harold truly plans to bring Lilith with them. He addresses Saint Ishal directly, admitting he wants her to come, but hesitates, worried that her presence would make her a target for their enemies. Seeing his hesitation, Lilith leans in to offer advice. She whispers that he should rest assured, as the Kabadir Kingdom poses no threat to someone of Hal's power, and suggests he use this as a chance to grow closer to the Saintess. Taking her words to heart, Harold turns to Saint Ishal and formally invites her to accompany him, not just as a guard, but as his fiancée. Offer Juliet, Hal enthusiastically accepts. Lilith observes with a satisfied smile, noting that the personal invitation clearly delighted the Saintess. The matter settled, he turns to his maid, Monica, and sincerely thanks her for her helpful intervention. She puffs up with pride, her face beaming. She declares that such assistance is only natural for a super-talented and beautiful maid like herself. He stood attentively behind Prince Harold as he and Saint Ishal sat for tea. The prince inquired about their departure for the Kabadir Kingdom, and Lilith, acting as his aide, relayed Minister Olsen's timeline. They would leave in approximately 3 months. Hearing this, the prince turned to Saint Ishal with a warm smile. The Saintess, her expression resolute, promised to train him thoroughly for the day of their departure. Harold simply acknowledged her intent, understanding the gravity of her words. Training began in earnest. In the courtyard, Harold braced himself, successfully deflecting a powerful blow. Watching from the side, Lady Carla expressed her admiration for his surprising resilience. Lilith, however, was utterly astonished, realizing he had just blocked 70% of the force behind Saint Ishal's attack. She then turned her attention to the prince, noting how much he had exerted himself. Seeing the opportunity, Lilith suggested he take a bath to recover. Lady Carla, also feeling the fatigue of the day, agreed it was a good idea. Her agreement, however, came with a determined glint in her eye. She declared her intention to accompany the Saintess for the rest of the day. Plan was soon revealed. As Prince Harold settled into his bath, he let out a cry of shock, finding Lady Carla already there. Flustered, Carla questioned Lilith, asking why Saint Ishel hadn't been informed. Lilith coolly admitted she had intentionally kept Harold in the dark to surprise him, earning an exasperated sigh from Carla. Prince Harold, flustered, explains to Saint Ishel that since they are preparing to visit the kingdom of Cape Deer with Sandra, he was hoping Hal would help him choose a dress. Hal looks on, confused, as Harold emphatically insists it's the right thing to do. Suddenly, Carla appears behind him, whispering that this is a date. The suggestion leaves Harold utterly shocked, realizing she had scared him half to death. He recoils, internally panicking that calling it a date is too much of a leap. His only goal, he tells himself, is to accompany her as her fiancée while she gets a dress. He fears that if he gets the wrong idea and acts like a smug boyfriend, Sandra will give him a cold, disgusted look that would make him die on the spot. Carla asks for clarification. Sweating, Harold explains that since he's going with Sandra as her fiancée, he should probably match his outfit with hers. Hearing this, Saint Ishel covers her mouth, a look of delighted realization dawning on her face. Her eyes gleam as she declares that they must properly show off their relationship in the kingdom of Cape Deer, telling Harold to just do as she says. Harold, blushing intensely, tells her stop. From the side, Carla observes that this is an impressive step for the prince, and notes that her lady, Hal, seems very pleased with the development. Later, at a clothier shop, Saint Ishel sits with a smug smile as Harold, now in his formal dark attire, looks on. He muses that he had been thinking of showing Cass around the royal capital, but this has taken precedence. Carla addresses Hal, remarking that it feels as though she's been outplayed by someone named Monica. She then announces that she and Miss Cass will be waiting, encouraging Hal and Harold to enjoy themselves. Perched on her shoulder, Xandra declares the situation so tasty. Inside the shop, Saint Ishel presents herself in a new outfit, asking for his opinion. Harold, completely flustered and blushing, can only manage a choke. As Hal continues to model different dresses, Harold is overwhelmed. He thinks about how happy he is to see so many sides of Sandra, but admits he has no idea which is best because they are all so cute. When she asks about another elegant dress, he can only agree that it looks great. His mind raced as the proprietor of the boutique, a kindly-looking older woman, gestured them forward. He recognized her work instantly. The dresses and accessories she designed were famous as gift items in the world of Inhaza, capable of greatly boosting the heroine's affection. Memory of one particular design sent a chill down his spine. The pure white haute couture was a paid item with an even lower acquisition rate than any weapon, and he recalled with dread how much of his part-time pay had vanished in pursuit of it. As he reeled, Saint Ishel commented cheerfully that his current attire suited him wonderfully, just as Lady Morgan had said. Al, however, seemed to have that very dress on her mind. She shyly inquired about the pure white haute couture. The shopkeeper, Lady Morgan, beamed with delight, confirming that they did indeed have it. She then leaned in conspiratorially, adding that it is generally something one would wear for a very specific occasion. The unspoken implication hung heavily in the air. A jolt of pure shock coursed through Harold as the truth crashed down upon him. The pure white haute couture, it was a wedding dress. While Harold was frozen in horror, Saint Ishel began to blush. A realization dawned on her as well. His inquiry just now had sounded exactly like he was asking for a wedding dress for her. She looked up at him, her eyes sparkling with a soft, hopeful light. Shopkeeper, misinterpreting the charged silence, enthusiastically declared she would prepare it at once. Completely flustered, Harold tried to salvage the situation, stammering that Hal was his fiancée, so if she would like to, he trailed off, suggesting she could try it on. Hal simply watched him, a pleased, knowing smile gracing her lips. In an elegantly appointed room, Saint Ishel, now known as Sandra, presents herself to Prince Harold in a flowing white dress. She steps forward hesitantly, asking if it looks good on her. Harold is completely taken aback, his mind reeling. He had thought the dress was merely a gift to increase affection and hadn't anticipated this outcome. He stammers her title, his face flushing with heat. He had never imagined the garment would be so alluringly designed. Shaking off his initial shock, Harold beams and reassures her that it looks amazing, that it looks great on her. Sandra gasps, covering her mouth as a deep blush spreads across her face. Harold gently takes her shoulders, addressing her as Sandra and suggesting they save this precious moment for when it truly matters. Overwhelmed, Sandra begins to cry tears of joy, wondering why she feels this way when she should be happy. She manages a choked, affirmative response. Shopkeeper, Lady Morgan, observes the tender scene. Sandra turns to her, requesting that when the time for her wedding comes, she wants Lady Morgan to create the very best gown. The elderly woman agrees with delight, promising to prepare the finest pure white haute couture in the world. Sandra clings to Harold's arm, her face radiant with a pure, happy smile. She tells him she's truly happy, leaving him flustered but holding her hand tightly. Later, after their visit to the shop, Harold sits at a desk, a sealed letter before him. He states there was one more thing to do before heading to the kingdom of Cape Tyr. He turns to his maid, Monica, and asks if she knows what titles are. She repeats the question back to him, "Titles, my lord?" He confirms it and tells her to come with him. It is known that in the world of Engage Hazard, there are 4 main ways to power up the protagonist and heroines. As they walk down a corridor, with Xandra the cat trotting alongside, Harold explains that there is something called titles that boost stats. He lists the other methods: leveling up, fusing duplicate cards for strengthening, and equipping enhanced weapons. He continues, clarifying that titles are like passive skills that are always in effect, each providing a different type of bonus. He admits he had no idea such a thing existed. Monica, however, calmly states she is not surprised, as she had learned about them from old texts. He and Monica arrived before a large, ornate door set into a stone cliff face. As his hand reached out, his shadow stretching before him, he recognized it as the entrance to an ancient, long-forgotten labyrinth. Their destination reached, he announced to Xandra that he was heading in, believing that acquiring a title here was crucial for their safety in the kingdom of Cape Tyr. His declaration was cut short as Monica cried out for him to wait, questioning if he truly meant to enter with just the two of them. He paused only to clarify the nature of the trial, explaining that only one person could obtain a title from this place, and it could only be earned by challenging it alone. This rule did little to soothe Monica. Her face filled with anguish as she protested that if she let him go knowing the danger, she would be unworthy of being Prince Harold's personal maid. He immediately told her she was wrong. With a serious gaze, he explained that it was precisely because she was more worthy than anyone to be his maid that he had chosen to take on this challenge by himself. He continued, confiding that she was the one person he could tell these things to more than anyone else. He commanded her to never again say something that suggested she was unworthy. With a slight blush, Monica quietly agreed. The matter settled, Harold announced he was leaving for real this time. Restoring her professional composure, Monica declared that she would be right there, waiting for his safe return. She then began a grand pronouncement, identifying herself as Monica, his super elite drop-dead gorgeous maid whom he adores and can't live without. She concluded her grand declaration with a humble request for him to take care. As her words hung in the air, Harold turned and walked into the darkness of the labyrinth entrance, leaving her to wait. In the mouth of a dark, cavernous passage, Prince Harold holds a lantern, his companion Xandra perched on his shoulder. He turns back to Saintess Hal, who stands in the shadows of the entrance, and asks if she is truly all right. Harold confidently tells her not to worry, asserting that he and Xandra can navigate this place without any trouble, though Xandra seems less certain. He calls out to Xandra as Saintess Hal, holding her own lantern, steps out from the passage behind them. Suddenly, a pack of large, monstrous black hounds with glowing red eyes emerges from the darkness, growling menacingly. Hal recognizes the beasts, shouting in alarm that they are sea Sith. In response to the threat, Harold moves swiftly, wondering how effective his methods will be against them. He calmly reaches into his lantern and retrieves a small, round device. Sea Sith hounds lunge at him, but Harold stands his ground, ready to confirm his suspicions about their capabilities. The device instantly expands into a large, circular shield, which he uses to expertly parry the attack of an oncoming hound. Another hound snaps at him, but its powerful bite is met by the solid shield. Harold scoffs at the predictable attack, calling it naive. The immediate assault blocked, Harold calls out to Xandra, The small creature, with a look of fierce determination, affirms that it is ready. In command, Xandra unleashes the snatch ability, sending a wave of energy rippling through the cave that strikes the sea sith. Harold observes the effect, confirming his theory. Even in a labyrinth, these common enemies possess little to no resistance against status ailments. One of the hounds stands dazed, its eyes swirling, its aggression completely nullified. Turns to Xandra with a confident expression, explaining that he has now figured it out. With her by his side, he is certain they can conquer this ancient labyrinth and safely obtain the title they seek. Perched on his shoulder, Xandra seems to ask if he is truly certain. As if summoned by his words, their path forward is suddenly obstructed by a swarm of winged, bat-like creatures descending from the cavern ceiling. Monsters dive towards him in a coordinated assault, but he is prepared, raising his expandable shield to intercept the attack. Behind his defense, he shouts a single, sharp command. Xandra, responding instantly, she leaps from his shoulder, confirming the order as she unleashes her snatch ability upon the entire swarm. The effect is immediate. The bat-like creatures, their flight suddenly arrested, plummet helplessly to the stone floor below. The minor threat dispatched, Harold observes that they have traveled far and must be approaching their objective. He then turns his attention to Xandra, noting that she seems utterly terrified of the labyrinth, a fear she can't hide even after 2 hours. He tells her it's useless to feign ignorance, but she playfully asks what he could possibly mean. He muses on the strangeness of a magical beast being afraid of a labyrinth, wondering if it's simply because she is still so young. The path leads them to a massive, ornate gate. As he stands before it, lantern in hand, Harold senses a powerful presence waiting on the other side. "All right, let's go," he declares, putting his full weight into pushing the heavy gate open. Beyond the gate, a new guardian awaits. A massive, armored lion-like beast with a gem set in its forehead, its body tensed and a low growl rumbling from its chest. Stone beast stood before them, its form unmistakable. Harold stared, a look of shocked recognition on his face as he identified the creature. It was a Leo golem. He realized, the very same type of mid-boss he had encountered in the Henlin Labyrinth. Determined to move forward, Harold locked his gaze on the menacing stone lion guarding the corridor. Beast lunged violently, but Harold raised his massive shield just in time to absorb the devastating strike. Gritting his teeth against the impact, he held the line and signaled for Xandra to strike. Answering his call, Xandra executed a swift snatch attack, tearing through the golem's armored limbs. Watching the stone armor crumble, the small familiar cheered at their apparent success. However, the dust cleared to reveal the beast still standing, whipping up a fierce gust of wind. Glowing aura enveloped the guardian as its shattered stone body began to rapidly heal itself. Realizing the monster could continuously regenerate, Harold braced himself for a tactical readjustment. Scanning the construct closely, he spotted a glowing rune mark etched near its foot, the source of its power. He instructed Xandra to slice the mark directly with her claws while he charged ahead to draw its fury. Leaping into action, the dark-haired youth drove his blade straight toward the creature's chest, landing a heavy physical strike that cracked its stony hide. As the monster reeled back from the blow, Harold shouted to his small companion that the opening was here. Hearing her cue, Xandra sprang high into the air with sharp claws outstretched. The swift execution of her snatch technique, Xandra struck the runic core, shattering the critical magic binding the beast together. Deprived of its magical anchor, the massive guardian lion groaned in defeat before collapsing entirely into a harmless pile of rubble. Xandra bounded over, proudly celebrating that they had taken down the guardian together. Harold grinned in agreement, sharing a warm fist-to-paw bump with his loyal friend. Catching his breath, Harold noted that defeating one was only the beginning, as 4 more Leo golems stood between them and the title hidden deeper inside. He reflected on how fortunate it was that Hal was absent, allowing them to clear the ancient labyrinth today. He had secretly asked her brother to arrange a meeting for her with the Chevalier house, though he knew Hal would be furious if she ever found out about the setup. Leaving the shattered remains of the first guardian behind, the duo advanced deeper down the stone corridor, where the next formidable foe already stood waiting. Surrounded by stone beasts, Harold grinned with absolute confidence, urging his companion to finish things quickly before Hal could find out. With a quick clap of his hands, the massive guardians crumpled into dust, clearing their path through the corridor. Approaching a massive, sealed wooden gate at the deepest part of the ancient ruins, they paused to catch their breath. Reaching out toward the heavy doors, he knew that the true guardian guarding the title lay just beyond. As the doors parted, a towering, one-eyed cyclopean giant loomed before them, its sheer size causing Xandra to gasp in shock. This behemoth was the Gigant Spriggon, the final guardian tasked with protecting the climax of this dungeon quest. Looking up at the monolithic foe, Harold remarked on the ridiculous scale of the challenge meant for a single warrior. Xandra loudly reminded him of their past victories over formidable beasts, insisting that together with Hal, they could never lose. Inspired by the small creature's unexpected bravery despite its earlier fear, he smiled brightly, declaring Xandra the ultimate partner. With renewed determination, Harold drew his blade and prepared to charge forward, ready to take down the giant alongside his companion. He noted that the colossus wouldn't strike unless provoked, so he commanded his feline companion to hold nothing back and take the monster down immediately. Responding with a sharp roar, the small feline unleashed a massive, sweeping spell that tore through the air toward the giant. Razor-sharp energy blades slashed directly across the giant's chest with immense force. Though he hoped the strike had settled the battle, his relief was short-lived as the unharmed titan retaliated with a crushing blow that forced him onto the defensive. Bracing his shield as the heavy fist slammed into his guard, he realized that simply defending against such overwhelming power would lead to defeat. Giant followed up with another fierce strike, forcing the young warrior to absorb the massive shockwave with his shield. As he held his ground, he recalled his relentless daily training sessions where he endured fierce strikes from a far more formidable opponent. Drawing confidence from those brutal sparring matches against his powerful companion, his resolve hardened as he prepared to push back. Facing the towering, one-eyed giant, Xandra warned Harold that Snatch had no effect, urging him to take action as the beast loomed over them. Determined to break through, Harold launched a coordinated assault, dodging just as the monster brought its massive fist crashing down. Giant's blow shattered the ground, but Harold and his companions moved swiftly through the dust, holding their ground. Closing the distance, Harold instructed Xandra to aim directly for the single by using claws, seeking a decisive opening. Sprinted forward to create a distraction, darting past the creature's defenses to set up the strike. Taking advantage of the opening, Xandra unleashed another attempt at close range, unleashing swirling magic toward the monster's face. Anticipating the move, the giant shielded its eye with a heavy hand, blocking the strike and forcing Harold to leap back. Its weak point guarded, the giant remained defensive as Harold realized their strategy had been completely seen through. Recognizing the standoff, Harold halted the direct assault, telling Xandra to hold back until they could create a proper opening. Stepping calmly before the defensive behemoth, Harold casually posed a question, taunting the monster that he could eliminate it in a single instant. Spread his arms wide, mocking the massive creature for cowering behind its hand despite its imposing size. Enraged by the provocation, the Cyclops lowered its hand and bellowed with fury, exposing its vulnerable eye once more. Seizing the exact moment the beast opened its guard, he shouted for Xandra to strike. Launching herself into the air with sharp precision, the feline familiar slashed directly across the giant's exposed eye. As the monocular titan shrieked in agony, Harold smiled with satisfaction, his ploy having succeeded completely. Unable to withstand the critical blow, the behemoth crashed backward onto the stone floor. Bounding back toward him, Xandra pounced onto his chest in jubilation, startling him slightly. After celebrating their hard-fought victory together, they proceeded deeper into the ancient structure. Stepping into a vast, pristine hall supported by colossal pillars, Harold approached a grand altar at the far end. Standing before the ancient stone stele, he realized it contained a coveted title reward. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the ancient carvings etched into the stone stele. The moment his skin touched the cold surface, a subtle reaction occurred, confirming his suspicions. With absolute confidence, he realized this was indeed the coveted title he had been searching for, watching intently as a glowing crest materialized before him. As the radiant mark surged forward, it absorbed directly into his arm, transferring its ancient magic into his very body. Expecting a visible sign on his wrist, he examined his arm, only to find nothing drawn upon his skin, leaving him briefly questioning if the transfer had truly succeeded. Curious, Xandra leaped down onto his head, pondering aloud whether touching the steel would bestow a title upon him as well, even though the crest was meant for a single recipient. Without hesitation, Xandra sprang toward the stone, and to their surprise, the steel flashed bright once more, bestowing a second mark upon the small creature. Examining Xandra's belly, where a dark mark had formed, Harold was astounded that both of them managed to acquire titles, specifically impenetrable, which dramatically boosted physical and magical defense. Realizing his own mark was likely hidden elsewhere on his body, he squirmed in ticklish discomfort as Xandra eagerly scrambled over him to search for it. With a triumphant grin, Xandra announced that the elusive title mark had landed right on his rear, leaving Harold groaning in embarrassing defeat. Having completed their secret task, Harold and Xandra finally made their way back, welcomed warmly by Saintess Hal as they returned from the depths. She welcomed Harold back, eager to serve him in her capacity as his exclusive maid, asking if he had successfully obtained the desired title. He reluctantly admitted that he had indeed acquired it, but when pressed, blushed in embarrassment, unable to bring himself to reveal that the mark of impenetrable had been etched onto his backside. Ignoring his hesitation, she immediately offered to wash his body in the bath, insisting that attending to his needs was her duty. Harold frantically rejected the offer, declaring that he would bathe alone, yet she dragged him along regardless, leaving him helpless against her relentless enthusiasm. 3 days later, in the royal audience chamber, King Evil addressed Harold, tasking him with leading an embassy to ensure the success of their agreement with the kingdom of Kavatia. The king also assigned Wilfred to accompany him as an assistant, prompting Harold to bow and take his leave. Observing the proceedings, Minister Olsen voiced his concerns to the king, noting that while Harold was originally slated to go alone, having Wilfred along was necessary due to potential trouble, given Wilfred's impressive performance with a diplomatic envoy. As they walked through the hall, Wilfred subtly prodded Harold, suggesting that the court officials believed Harold lacked the political finesse required for the diplomatic mission, while secretly harboring his own ambitions regarding the Holy Kingdom. Meanwhile, the king considered the political ramifications, realizing that sending both princes might delay decisions, but ultimately yielded to the advice of Olsen and the other ministers to delegate the mission. Wilfred continued to press Harold, questioning why he had pushed the hosting duties entirely onto him, and offered to petition the prime minister to alter the arrangements if Harold felt overwhelmed. Harold dismissively replied that traveling together was far less troublesome than dealing with potential political fallout, pointing out that questioning the judgment of the king and ministers was unwise. Sometime later, aboard a ship bound for their destination, Lilith smiled brightly as she took in the refreshing ocean breeze, calling out cheerfully to Harold. Lilith expressed her concern regarding the stern expressions of the departing officials, but Harold assured her that he would manage any troubles, thanking her and the others for taking on the responsibility of guarding the vessel during the voyage. He recalled how Sandra had initially hesitated to join their journey, even shaking her head in refusal when Wilfred first made the request. Yet, as she looked at Harold with pleadful eyes, calling him brother, it was clear how much had changed. Harold maintained that his primary duty was to fulfill his role in preventing war, prioritizing that above all else, even as Sandra warmly noted that despite growing so strong, he remained true to himself. Laughing off the compliment, Harold admitted that he felt he had been taking the scenic route ever since that day. He acknowledged that he still needed to work much harder to become a worthy fiancé fit to stand beside her when the promised day arrived. Overcome with emotion, Hal gently took his hand, declaring herself the happiest person in the world to be cherished so deeply by him. Deep down, Harold recognized her as his most precious support, binding their hearts across past, present, and future. Because of this profound bond, Harold resolved inside himself that he refused to give up on this world. Standing hand in hand together at the bow of the ship, they looked out over the vast, sparkling ocean as their journey into the unknown truly began.